Chapter 1060. Since he had spoken so straightforwardly, the three of them naturally didn't want to stay and ask any more questions. With Gio as the leader, they left one after another. The three of them walked out of the small courtyard obediently. Yu Qianqiu took out his flying instrument again. After the three of them boarded it, it was still Songyan Exan who drove it. Before leaving, the three of them once again bowed to Grandma Yen, who was standing in the courtyard. Just as the flying shuttle slowly flew away, Yu Qianqiu looked back again. His gaze inadvertently swept across the grave on the left side of the mountain, and he seemed to see a familiar name on the tombstone. That name flashed across his mind like a flash of lightning, but it was quickly captured by him. Immediately, he cried out in alarm, "Wait a minute! Old song, stop!" The flying shuttle that was about to accelerate suddenly stopped in the air. Songyan Exan looked back and said in a deep voice, "What do you want again? Don't be crazy again. Don't you know where you are?" Grandma Yen, who was about to turn back to her house in the courtyard, also turned around when she heard the voice. Her eyes flickered as she stared at the few people on the flying shuttle. Jiu awkwardly bowed to Yu Qianqiu and apologized. Then, he gently pulled Yu Qianqiu and said in a low voice, "If you have anything to say, wait until we leave this place. Don't make too much noise here. If you disturb the resting dead, Grandma Yin will not be happy." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and waved away his hand that was pulling him. His puzzled gaze kept sweeping back and forth between the two piles of graves that looked like the eyes of a monster. On the tombstone on the left was written, "Father Taishu Zheng's tomb. Woman Taishu Xian's tomb." On the right was written, "Husband Moon God's tomb. Wife Yan's tomb. Taishu Zheng. Taishu Xian. Aren't all the gods buried here? Why is Taishu Zheng's tomb here?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed slightly, frowned and pondered for a while, shook his head and muttered to himself, "Maybe it's a coincidence that we have the same name." Then he came to his senses, waved his hand at Songyan Exan and said, "It's all right, I didn't leave, right?" Since the two of them were standing so close to each other, Songyan Exan naturally heard what he said. He looked at Taishu Zheng's tombstone with some doubt, and was prepared to ask about it later. Just as he was about to drive the flying shuttle, he heard Grandma Yan's voice coming from below. "Wait!" The three of them were shocked, thinking that Yu Qianqiu's loud voice had angered her. Xin Yu immediately smiled bitterly and cupped his hands at her. "Grandma Yan, please calm down. It's his first time here, and he doesn't know the rules here. Granny Yan, please be magnanimous and let him off." There was no other way. If something were to happen to Yu Qianqiu, he would also be in trouble. Thus, he could only try his best to help. "I'm not as heartless as you think." Grandma Yan's eyes became bright and lively. She raised her hand and pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, "You actually know about Taishu Zheng and Taishu Xian. This old lady is a little surprised. Why don't you come down and have a good chat with this old lady? I told you not to talk nonsense, but you didn't listen. Look at you now." Songyan Exan secretly sent a voice transmission angrily. Yu Qianqiu looked at Xin Yu speechlessly, as if he was asking if it would be okay. While Xin Yu was also trying to figure out Grandma Yan's intention, Grandma Yan had already teleported to the tomb on the left. She waved at Yu Qianqiu, who was in the air, and said, "Don't worry. If I still have a fiery temper, I wouldn't be guarding the tomb here. Come down and have a chat with this old lady. I have something to ask you." Yu Qianqiu paused, then cupped his hands and said with a hearty smile, "I'll do as you say." In a flash, he appeared in front of the tomb on the left. He looked abnormally short in front of the 7 to 8 meters tall tombstone. The dark red words on the tombstone were like a bloody mouth that wanted to devour him. It made him feel a little uncomfortable. "I wonder what Grandma Yin wants to ask this junior?" Yu Qianqiu asked respectfully. Grandma Yin walked to the tombstone and raised her hand to touch the three relatively small words Taishu Xian. After a while, her palm landed on the word Xian. She tilted her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. "If I remember correctly, you used to call yourself Yu Qianqiu, right? Grandma has a good memory. I just said my name casually once and Grandma remembered it." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in amazement and said, "That's right. I am indeed Yu Qianqiu." The two people on the flying shuttle showed a disgusted look at the same time. What a glib-tongued junior. I'm not so old that I can forget what I just heard. Grandma Yin retracted her hand from the tombstone. She looked at Yu Qianqiu carefully for a while and said, "You're only at the early stage of minor immortal. I wonder how many years you've been cultivating for you to achieve what you have today." Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked to see that the other party was able to see through his cultivation with a single glance. He replied honestly, "Time flies in the blink of an eye." Unknowingly, it has already been over 40 years since I stepped onto the path of cultivation. I've been mediocre for so many years. Initially, he wanted to lie for hundreds or even thousands of years, but he couldn't figure out how good the other party's eyesight was, so he could only answer honestly. "You've reached the early stage of minor immortal in just 40 years? Grandma Yin looked at him again in surprise and said, "How can you be so fast? I can see that your aptitude isn't top-notch. Could it be that you've taken some panacea?" Shen Yu and Songyin Xian were equally surprised. To be able to step into the minor immortal cultivation from a mortal in just a few decades was indeed incredible. "Grandma, please understand." Yu Qianqiu quickly followed her words and said with a silly smile, "I've relied on panacea to forcefully increase my cultivation. I've taken the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, the Marrow Cleansing Pill, and the Immortal Ascension Pill. That's why I've barely reached the early stage of minor immortal cultivation." Grandma Yin revealed a look of understanding. Then, she said with some regret, "Although it's fast to increase your cultivation this way, it's spoiling your body's foundation. Your future achievements will be limited, unless you have the opportunity to go to the divine realm in the future to obtain some opportunities. Otherwise, forget it. It's easier said than done to ascend from the immortal world to the divine realm." She straightened her expression and returned to the topic at hand. She frowned and said, "You've only stepped into the path of cultivation for a few decades. How could you have heard of Taishu Zheng and Taishu Xian? As far as I know, although Taishu Zheng was famous in the past, after he died in the hands of the devil god, under the suppression of the diabolism, very few people in the lower three realms know about Taishu Zheng. Even if you've heard of Taishu Zheng from someone else, his daughter, Taishu Xian, was not born in the lower three realms. How could someone from the lower three realms know about Taishu Xian?" Lower three realms? Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment. Then he understood. The so-called three realms in the past referred to the devil realm, the immortal realm, and the netherworld. But after the devil realm was sealed, everyone used to call it the lower three realms. So the human realm replaced the devil realm and became the so-called three realms. In short, whether it was the three realms in the past or the current three realms, in the eyes of the people from the divine realm, they were all called the lower three realms because their divine realm was superior. Taishu Xian? I've never heard of it. I just couldn't help but feel puzzled when I saw the name on the tombstone. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He pointed to the grave made of dark red crystals and said, "So the person buried in this grave is really the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, who was equally famous as the devil god." The ancestor of all demons who was equally famous as the devil god. Songyin Xian and Shen Yu looked at each other in shock. They had naturally heard of the peerless devil god, who dominated the three realms in the past, but they had never heard of the ancestor of all demons, who was equally famous as the devil god. To be able to be equally famous as the devil god, how powerful must that person be? But why had they never heard of it before? Thinking about what Granny Yin had said before, the two of them suddenly fell into deep thought. The ancestor of all demons died in the hands of the devil god. Maybe there was some secret between the two that the devil god didn't want outsiders to know. So, the diabolism suppressed it and made this past disappear from everyone's sight. However, the two of them felt strange. How did Yu Qianqiu know about the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng? Granny Yin nodded and said, "It seems that you really do know some things. You have some experience." "That's right, the person resting in this grave is the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, who was equally famous as the devil god." "That's not right." Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, "I heard that the ancestor of all demons didn't become a god when he died in the hands of the devil god. But why is his corpse buried here?" Isn't this the place where gods are buried? This matter involves the realm of gods, and the process is extremely complicated. It's too far away for you to know, so there's no point in telling you. Granny Yin sighed slightly and said, I wanted to ask you about little girl Xian. Since you don't know, then forget it. Go do what you should do. After saying that, she turned around and left. However, Yu Qianqiu couldn't stand it. Bai Suzhen was currently cultivating the Thousand Demons Heart Sutra left behind by Taishu Zheng. What if there were any hidden dangers in it? Since someone knew the ins and outs of this matter, he naturally had to ask about it. He immediately shouted anxiously, Granny Yen, please wait. Seeing that he was making noise again, Shen Yu and Songyan Xian were a little afraid. They were afraid that this guy would really anger Granny Yen. Sure enough, Granny Yen turned around and frowned. I've already said that it's useless to tell you. Why do you have to force it? This isn't something that a little cultivator from the lower realm like you should know. Leave quickly. Don't disturb the peace of the dead and anger me. Damn it. You want to ask me to stay, but I want to ask and disturb the peace of the dead. What kind of logic is this? Yu Qianqiu felt sick in his heart, but on the surface, he sincerely cupped his hands and said, Granny, did Taishu Xian pass through the barrier of heavens and go outside? Granny Yen, who had already walked to the door of the small courtyard, immediately stopped and turned around. Her eyes were slightly cold as she said, In that case, you have heard of little girl Xian, but you deliberately hid it from me just now. Once he said those words and saw the anger that rose between his eyebrows, Shen Yu and Grey Cloud Xian immediately became on tenterhooks. Grey Cloud Xian even cursed Yu Qianqiu in his heart for having nothing better to do than to look for trouble. Chapter 1061. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not think this way. He was more confident in bargaining, because he had guessed Taishu Xian's whereabouts correctly. He cupped his fists respectfully and said, Junior has always yearned for those legendary seniors. Therefore, every time I hear about their deeds, if I don't ask them about it, I will feel as if I'm sitting on pins and needles. Because of this, I heard some things about the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, and was able to talk to Grandma face to face. If Granny is willing to tell me the details, I will immediately use all the forces in the three realms to track down the whereabouts of Taishu Xian. You are just a lowly pawn in the early stage of small immortal. How dare you ask me to use all the forces in the three realms to help me find that person? Humph! How many people can you use with your lowly cultivation? Granny Yin said as she approached him step by step. She said in a deep voice with a frosty face, How dare you play the game of bargaining in front of me? It seems that I have to teach you a lesson. Yu Qianqiu had always been one to achieve his goals. Every time something big happened, he would remain calm. He squinted his eyes and did not show any fear. Instead, he calmed down. Without moving, he cupped his hands and replied calmly, Granny, you are wrong. Although my cultivation is not high, I am afraid that few people in the lower realm can compare to me in terms of connections. Seeing that the other party was still approaching, he raised his bargaining chip again and said, Let's not talk about anything else. I have the decree of the immortal emperor in the immortal world, so I can travel freely in the immortal world. I also have the token of the emperor of the underworld, given by the emperor of the underworld, so I can do whatever I want in the underworld. Except for the devil realm, which is sealed and I can't enter. I think it is not difficult to find someone in the lower realm. As long as she is still in the lower realm, I have a way to find her. Then he pointed at Shen Yu and continued to raise his bargaining chip. He said confidently, In order to find the person who broke into this place, I can even find Shen Yu and enter the barrier of heavens to search. Do you still not believe in my ability to find someone even with these proofs? As a result, Granny Yin was still unmoved. It seemed that she did not believe his answer at all. In this critical situation, Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, Granny Yin, even a person with a wide network, like me, has never heard of Taishu Xian in the lower realm. Aren't you worried that something has happened to her? Don't you want me to help you find out about her? Even if she is dead or alive. These words were like a spell that immediately froze Grandma Yin a few steps away from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Song Yin Xian and Xunyu, who were extremely nervous, slowly let out a sigh of relief. Although they were fine for the time being, the two of them were still very worried. Their eyes stared down without moving. Although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yin looked at Xunyu and said, Xiaoyu, tell me honestly, is what he said true or false? Although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yin looked at Xunyu and said, Xiaoyu, tell me honestly, is what he said true or false? If you dare to help him deceive me, don't blame me for being rude. Even if he is deceiving you, my life is in his hands. Killing him is no different than killing me. I can't not help him. Xunyu smiled bitterly in his heart and replied, Granny, you're worrying too much. In the outside world, his strength in the lower three realms is indeed extraordinary. Don't be fooled by his low cultivation level. He's the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. This time, the immortal emperor of the immortal realm even sent the chief consecrator of the number 1 sect, Heartless Palace, to protect him. Then, she pointed at Qing Yun Xan and continued, just before we entered the barrier of heavens, I saw him talking to the emperor of the underworld in the endless horizon with my own eyes. What he said is true. Xunyu could be said to have helped with all his might this time, but he had no other choice in order to save his life. Granny Yin slowly turned her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, In that case, can you guarantee that you will help me find little girl Xian? This, Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, I never boast shamelessly. If I can do it, I can do it. If I can't, I won't boast. If Granny says that she will, I can't guarantee that I will definitely help you find her. Since she has not been famous for so many years, I am worried that she might have met with an accident. But as long as she left some clues outside, I'll be able to find out about her. Qing Yun Xian, who was on the flying shuttle, really wanted to despise him. Wasn't he boasting shamelessly? The outside world was so big, and so many years had passed. Even if the emperor of the underworld and the immortal emperor joined forces, they might not be able to find out anything about Taishu Xian from some clues. You're amazing. You're more amazing than Jin Tai and Bai Qi combined. Although he thought about it, he naturally wouldn't expose it. After all, it also involved his fate. However, he still quite admired that guy. As long as he was determined, he dared to lie to anyone. He was really audacious. Jiu Yu, who was helping the villain, looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu didn't promise to do everything. Instead, it made Granny Yin believe in his ability. This was Yu Qianqiu's method of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. In short, regardless of whether Granny Yin really believed him or not, the expression on her face finally eased. She asked lightly, How are you going to help me find information about Xianyu? Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. He cupped his hands and said, Of course I have to ask Senior to tell me about her appearance and characteristics. Otherwise, I don't even know what she looks like. How can I send people to find her? And the approximate time she left here. Of course, the more detailed the better. Granny Yin thought about it seriously. After a while, she slowly said, I really don't remember the specific time since I passed my days here. It should be about 200,000 years. She is very beautiful. If someone saw her at that time, they would definitely remember her. So it shouldn't be difficult to find out. But I'm really afraid that her appearance will bring trouble to herself. Although she was born in the god realm, due to a strange fate, she was born with the underworld body. In other words, she is a meditation cultivator. Apart from these 2 points, she also has a rare ability in the world. She was born with the art of divination. These are the characteristics. After Granny Yin finished speaking, she suddenly realized that Yu Qianqiu was stunned and seemed to be distracted. She immediately snorted angrily and said, Did you hear what I said? Know the art of divination. Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself blankly. He recalled the underworld saintess he met in the East Holy Land Palace. It seemed like she knew the art of divination. At that time, he felt that it was a little strange, so he had a deep impression of her. He shook his head slightly in disbelief and said, "Could it be her?" Chapter 1062. As soon as he said this, although his voice was soft, it immediately attracted the attention of the three people. They all looked at him in disbelief. Gray Cloud Xian stared blankly for a moment. Then his lips curled into a disdainful smile. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he didn't think there was such a coincidence. Yu Qianqiu knew him. As soon as he said he knew him, he guessed that Yu Qianqiu was trying to swindle him again. There was really nothing he didn't dare to do. Granny Yin regained her calmness after her surprise. She also didn't believe that there was such a coincidence. She dragged out a non-committal "oh" and said, "It seems that there is no lack of coincidences in this world. Could it be that you've seen little Xian?" Yu Qianqiu thought about the scene when he bumped into the underworld saintess. He waved his hand and asked thoughtfully, "I'm not sure. Granny Yin, does the Taishu Xian you mentioned like to wear black clothes, have long hair that goes down her shoulders, and cover half of her face with a black veil?" Listening to him speak so clearly, Song Yunxin and Shen Yu looked at each other, as if asking each other if they believed what he said. Granny Yan's eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "That's right. Little girl Xian had always had long hair that was unrestrained, and she liked to wear black clothes. As for the black veil that covers half of her face, it must be to hide her appearance. Does the person you mentioned know divination?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "It's because you said Taishu Xian knows divination. When I first met that person, she used a pentagonal black sand table to perform divination for me." Black sand table. Granny Yin interrupted him in surprise. She took a step forward and grabbed Yu Qianqiu's wrist. She said excitedly, "That's right, it can't be wrong. Little Xian is used to using black sand to perform divination. You must have seen her. Tell me, what happened to her?" Song Yunxin and Shen Yu looked at each other again. "Really? She can't be so accurate, right?" Yu Qianqiu grimaced and waved his hand. With a twisted expression he said, "Granny Yin, I know that you have a high cultivation level. Let's talk nicely. There's no need to get physical." Grandma Yin immediately reacted. She was too excited, and used too much strength to pinch him. She let go of her hand in embarrassment and apologized. "I lost my composure. Sigh. I am greatly indebted to her mother. Before she passed away, she entrusted her to me to take care of her. For so many years, there has been no news of her. Now that I suddenly received news of her, I can't help but lose control of my emotions. I hope that you can understand this old woman. I'm sorry." "Understood. Understanding. If that's the case, then there's no mistake. We're talking about the same person." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand heartily and said with a hearty laugh, "I've never known her name, but it turns out that her name is Taishu Xian. Hee. It seems that some things are predestined by the heavens. She and I are good friends, and she has a close relationship with you, Granny. Now that I have met you, Granny, if this isn't fate, then what is it? You're good friends with her?" Grandma Yin looked at Yu Qianqiu with an infinitely gentle expression. She reached out to hold his hand and patted it gently, like a grandmother looking at her grandson. She nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right. It's indeed fate. Tell me quickly, how is she now?" Songyin Xian and Shen Yu were dumbfounded, as they watched the two of them turn from a hostile couple into a close family. They didn't expect the world to be so unpredictable. It was really a coincidence that the Taishu Xian that Grandma Yin was looking for turned out to be a good friend of Yu Qianqiu. Even in their dreams, they didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu would pull their relationship all the way to the netherworld forbidden area. Yu Qianqiu didn't care so much. He was worried that the myriad demon heart sutra that Bai Suzhen was cultivating might have some hidden dangers. He wanted to deceive her and figure out the situation first. As for the future, he could think about it later. Anyway, he didn't do anything against reason, so there was no need for him to feel guilty. Thus, he patted Grandma Yan's hand intimately and said with a smile, "Granny, you can rest assured. Taishu Xian is living very well now. I'm afraid that no one in the netherworld or immortal world dares to touch her." "Oh, what do you mean?" Grandma Yin held his hand with both her hands, like a grandparent and grandchild who hadn't seen each other for a long time talking about their family. This happy scene was enviable to the onlookers. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the two people on the flying shuttle with a smile and said, "Actually, speaking of this Taishu Xian, although you haven't seen her before, the two of you must have heard of her great name. Her current status in the netherworld can be said to be second only to the emperor. Can you guess who she is now?" Songyan Xian and Shin Yu were confused at first. Then, they looked at each other and cried out in unison, "Madam Heiqi?" Grandma Yin frowned and said, "Madam Heiqi? Could it be that little Xian has found a man she likes?" Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He looked at the two disdainfully and said, "Is that all you know? Madam Heiqi is nothing. She is only the concubine of the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. Haven't you heard of the Underworld Saintess?" "Underworld Saintess?" Songyan Xian and Shin Yu cried out in surprise again. The two of them had naturally heard of the Underworld Saintess. However, this person was even more reclusive than the Emperor of the Underworld. She almost lived in seclusion in the Underworld Royal Palace. She was very mysterious. As time went by, unless someone mentioned her, very few people would remember her existence. Compared to Madame Heiqi, who had millions of soldiers and horses under her control, although the Underworld Saintess had a higher status in the Underworld Royal Palace, Madame Heiqi seemed to be second only to the Emperor of the Underworld. At this moment, Songyan Xian really wanted to ask Yu Qianqiu, "Are you kidding me? You are a close friend of the Underworld Saintess?" However, revealing Madame Heiqi's secret was no different from digging a hole for himself. When he thought of the conversation between the Emperor of the Underworld and Yu Qianqiu, who actually let everyone go, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. "That's right." Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at Grandma Yin with a smile. "I am now sure that Taishu Xian is the Underworld Saintess, conferred by the Underworld Emperor as the Underworld Saintess. She is very safe now. Grandma, you don't have to worry about her safety." "That's good." Grandma Yin heaved a sigh of relief. Yu Qianqiu was a little puzzled and asked, "Since Taishu Xian can enter and exit the boundary of heavens, why didn't she come back to see you after more than 200,000 years? Could it be that Grandma had some conflict with her?" "You've got the wrong idea. I brought her up by myself. I treat her as my own granddaughter. The two of us are lonely and depend on each other. How could there be any conflict?" Grandma Yin let out a long sigh and recalled with a confused look in her eyes, "Speaking of which, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have told her about her background. That year, she suddenly speculated that there would always be a loophole in the boundary of heavens, and the insurmountable boundary of heavens would open a path for a short period of time. The little girl was thinking about avenging her parents and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to escape from the boundary of heavens. She wanted to find a chance to avenge her parents outside. I couldn't persuade her, so I could only let her be." "Avenge her parents?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the towering tombstone beside him with a puzzled look and sighed. "I didn't expect Taishu Zheng, the ancestor of all demons, to have a daughter. In that case, Taishu Xian wants to seek revenge on the demon god. Her ambition is commendable. I hope she can kill the demon god as soon as possible." Because of this, he thought of Yin Juexing. Although he had gone to the sealed demonic world, he couldn't let go of the fact that he had the background of the demon god. He was afraid that the bastard would make a comeback at any time. If the Saintess of the Underworld had a way to eliminate the demon god, the pressure on him would be greatly reduced. No matter how powerful Yin Juexing was, he had the courage to fight him. However, the demon god's reputation was too great. Although he had gone to the divine world long ago, his heart-palpitating legend still lingered in the three realms. His influence had lingered for a long time. It was very frightening. Seeking revenge on the demon god? It's easier said than done. Grandma Yan's pupil shrank. She seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes were filled with horror. She shook her head with great difficulty and said, "You haven't seen the power of the demon god. It's hard to imagine how terrifying he is. He's so powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's a peerless genius. Perhaps he's even called the peerless genius. The demon god is the #1 expert in the divine world. It's almost impossible for little Xian to avenge her parents. What? Yu Qianqiu turned pale with fright when he heard that. Mo Shun is the #1 expert of the deity world. Is he that powerful? He was cursing in his heart. Yan Juexing had actually found such a cunning backer. I don't want to admit how powerful the demon god is, but he's indeed so powerful. I'm someone who has personally experienced it. Grandma Yin raised her hand and pointed to another grave. She smiled bitterly and said, "My man died in his hands, and I almost lost my life in his hands." Then, he waved his hand and pointed at the boundless land in the distance, sighing, "There are close to 10 million experts from the divine world buried in this vast cemetery. In fact, the number of people who were qualified to rest here in the beginning was only a few hundred. However, ever since the demon god came to the divine world, there have been close to 10 million more dead people here. 10 million experts from the divine world died by his hands alone. No one could stop him in the divine world. So tell me, is he not amazing? Killed more than 10 million experts in the divine world?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked and his scalp tingled. He knew that the demon god was powerful, but he didn't expect him to be so arrogant in the divine world. There was actually such a fierce person in the world. But then he felt that something was wrong. He scratched his head with a trace of doubt and said, "Are there so many gods in the divine world? Just the number of people who died is almost 10 million. Then the gods in the divine world are too worthless. This is just a misunderstanding. The divine world has been multiplying for countless years, and there are already trillions of living creatures. Because of the incomparable cultivation resources in the lower realm, there are also many experts of the divine level. But it's not so easy to obtain the position of God and be conferred as a real god. The cultivation in the divine world is divided into little god, great god, and ancient god. If you want to be conferred as a god, your cultivation must at least reach the level of great god. And you have to go through fierce competition and get the recognition of several ancient gods before you can be conferred as a god. Chapter 1063. Speaking up to this point, Grandma Yin shook her head with a bitter expression and said, "However, it's precisely because the few ancient gods held the power to become gods that they provoked the demon god. He single-handedly turned the entire divine world into a bloodbath, and it almost fell apart and couldn't be resolved." Although they were shocked by the fierceness of the demon god, they couldn't help but admire him. He was indeed a peerless genius. He single-handedly turned the entire divine realm upside down. What kind of demeanor was that? The demon god made such a big movement in the divine realm. Could it be that he wanted to share the power to become gods with the few ancient gods? Yu Qianqiu wondered. After all, people rarely went on a killing spree if there was no conflict of interest. No, it's not because of this. Granny Yin let out a long sigh and said, "Deities are also made by humans. No matter how high the cultivation of a god is, he is still a human. Humans have selfish thoughts. The few ancient gods held the power to become gods. In addition, after so many years of reproduction, their respective races could be said to have many descendants. Since they had selfish thoughts, they would naturally fight for the interests of their own race. At least, they would be biased towards their own descendants. Therefore, for many years, whenever a new deity position was formed in the world, most of it would be divided by the few ancient gods. It was very difficult for others to gain anything." As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed to Tai Shuzheng's tombstone and said, "Tai Shuzheng, the demon god, and little Xian's mother." The tragedy between the three of them began. It was also because of this that the demon god trampled on all living beings in the divine realm. When these three people were placed together, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim. He thought of something and said, "Could it be that these three people are? I heard that there were 3 peerless geniuses in the lower realm in that era. They were the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng, the demon god Yi, and a woman called Ming. It seems that there is a story between the 3 of them. Since Tai Shuzheng is Tai Shuxian's father, could it be that the woman called Ming is Tai Shuxian's mother?" As soon as he said this, Granny Yin immediately looked at him in surprise. She nodded and praised. No wonder a minor immortal could have such a large network in the three realms. You even know such a secret. Not bad. Little Xian's mother was indeed Ming. But as far as I know, Ming rarely showed up in the lower realm, and she was very low-key. She had never done anything that would make her famous. The number of people who knew of her existence could be counted with one's fingers. You actually know of her? This old woman has to look at you in a different light. Song Yun Xian. And Shin, you were also shocked. They did not expect Yu Qianqiu to know such a secret. Song Yun Xian looked at Yu Qianqiu with a bewildered gaze. Granny is too kind. I just happened to hear someone talking about it. After some modesty, Yu Qianqiu humbly asked. I heard that the three of them had a conflict because of fighting over the godhood. This matter has to start from the few ancient gods. Granny Yin recalled the past and said, originally, there were only two realms, the netherworld and the current human world. At that time, there were not as many living beings in the world as there are now. All kinds of living beings mixed together. Among them, there were 12 great gods with profound cultivation, who are now known as the ancient gods. Later, as all kinds of living beings multiplied, the human world could no longer accommodate them, and became more and more crowded. Therefore, the 12 ancient gods opened up 71 human worlds for all living beings to multiply and live in. Thus there were 72 worlds in the human world. Finally, it's not crowded anymore. Then one of the 12 ancient gods suggested that each person rules 6 realms. This method of equal distribution was agreed upon by the majority. However, the war god of the 12 ancient gods felt that it was unreasonable to divide the realms equally. They should divide the realms according to their strength. Due to his unfathomable strength, most people dare not speak out even if they are angry. Moreover, the 2 experts among the 12 ancient gods, who can suppress the war god, are not here. The publicly acknowledged number 1 expert, Dao, is elusive, appearing and disappearing from time to time. No one has seen him face to face. Among the 12 ancient gods, the great coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god only follow Dao's orders. Before receiving Dao's decree, they will not express any opinion on this matter. The other indignant ancient gods could only find another great god, who could suppress the war god, Yi, to uphold justice. However, Yi's whereabouts were also uncertain. He often traveled in the vast sea of stars in the universe. Just when the war god was about to make a mess, he suddenly returned from the vast universe. The other ancient gods were overjoyed and looked for him to uphold justice. Therefore, he found the war god and persuaded him to keep the peace. In the end, the war god refused to accept his mediation. As expected, the 2 of them fought. They fought several times. The war god was no match for Yi. In his anger, he ignited the 2 souls and 7 spirits of his 3 souls and 7 spirits, wanting to perish together with everyone. He had no choice but to draw the supreme god Bao and attach his life spirit to it. The other 2 souls and 7 spirits attached to the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. He shot 9 arrows in a row and sealed the ignited 2 souls and 7 spirits of the war god in 9 different time and space. An unprecedented battle that shocked the ancient gods ended just like that. And the 2 ancient gods fell apart just like that. Yu Qianqiu and the others listened with rapt attention. In fact, they had more or less heard of this legendary battle. It was just that too much time had passed, and there were many different versions of it. This was the first time they had heard of such a detailed story, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Tsk, a godly bow and arrow that could even seal a war god. Its power is truly extraordinary. I wonder where these godly weapons ended up in the end. Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked. He was thinking that if he could gather the 10,000 swords of the demon monarch of swords into one heaven and earth splitting arrow, and then find the supreme god Bao, he should be able to deal with the demon monarch. It would be even better if he could kill the demon monarch with one arrow. Divine weapons can only be obtained by those who are fated. Grandma Yin shook her head and said, There's no need to even think about the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. Our time and space is the main battlefield of the battle back then. The 9 divine arrows have already traveled to 9 other time and space. Unless someone's cultivation has reached the realm of the great god E, and can travel to different time and space, how can they be found? Hearing this, Songyin Xian and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at each other. Their eyes were filled with suspicion because they both knew that the 10,000 flying swords in the hands of the demon monarch of swords were the legendary great god Yi's heaven and earth-splitting arrow. Could it be that the legend was wrong? Or was it that the demon monarch of swords didn't have the heaven and earth-splitting arrow at all? Otherwise, how could the divine arrow that had traveled to 9 other time and space return? Grandma Yin continued, however, the supreme god Bao is still in our time and space. Moreover, it's very likely that it's lying dormant in one of the 72 worlds in the human world. It's just that even the ancient gods couldn't find it. We don't know where it has gone. What happened after that? Yu Qianqiu asked while the iron was hot. He still had to look for Bai Changchun and didn't have time to waste here. Naturally, it was better to get to the bottom of things as soon as possible. Grandma Yin didn't hide it from him. She tilted her head to look at the tomb of the moon god and sighed. After that war, the 72 worlds that were originally divided by 12 people became 10 people. Naturally, they couldn't even share it even if they wanted to. In the end, they had to go to war again. At this time, the great phoenix god brought the decree of Tao. He asked them to stop fighting and give up the 72 worlds in the human world to all living beings. He asked the gods to open up a new world to live in, and restricted them to not easily step into the human world in the future. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he couldn't help but ask, I heard that there's an illusory god in the god realm. The dragons and phoenixes are his messengers. Is it this Tao? You even know about the god realm. It seems that you're really knowledgeable. Grandma Yin nodded in appreciation and said, That's right. There's an illusory god in the god realm, which is the Tao that I mentioned just now. The dragons and phoenixes are willing to be his messengers. Will the gods really listen to him obediently and give up the 72 worlds that have already been opened up? Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. Of course not. You should know that even if it's an ancient god, it's not easy to open up a world. The energy required is also abnormally huge. Grandma Yin suddenly sneered and said, At that time, there were people who refused to do so. In the end, the coiling dragon god brazenly made a move and fought with the ancient god. In the end, he killed the ancient god. Everyone immediately swallowed their complaints and listened to him obediently. You should know that apart from the coiling dragon god, there was also the great phoenix god who was eyeing them covetously. Moreover, the two of them even had the support of Tao, who dared to say anything. Therefore, the gods were forced to open up a world together. This world was much bigger than the 72 worlds combined. It is now the celestial world in the lower realm. However, not long after, Tao forced everyone to open up the god realm again, and allowed the gods to migrate to the god realm. He also established the rule that mortals could ascend to the celestial world if they succeeded in their cultivation, and immortals could ascend to the god realm if they succeeded in their cultivation. Tao also allowed the 6 ancient gods, apart from the coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god, to hold the power to confer and become gods. He himself remained illusory and did not participate in these matters. The 6 ancient gods who obtained such power had the opportunity to establish their own supreme status. Finally, they no longer had any complaints about Tao. Actually, everyone knows the original intention of Tao when he established this ascension system. It was nothing more than to separate mortals, immortals, and gods so that everyone could do their own thing. Otherwise, the mortals with the weakest strength would forever be deprived of all the rights to live by the strong. There would be no chance for them to make a comeback at all. However, people were greedy. Even if they had a high and mighty position, they still could not be satisfied. The 6 ancient gods used the power in their hands to constantly expand their strength. They all wanted to seize the supreme power of life and death that looked down on everything. Chapter 1064. A disdainful sneer appeared on Granny Yan's face as she said, Every time a divine splendor descends from the conferred God mountain in the extreme region of heaven bearing, it means that someone in the world has attained the qualifications to be conferred as a god. The 6 ancient gods should summon the corresponding person to the conferred God mountain and absorb the divine splendor that descends from the sky to rapidly increase their cultivation and consolidate their position as gods. However, the 6 ancient gods who control the conferred God mountain don't follow the arrangement of the Tao. Every time a powerful divine light descends, it means that the person who is conferred as a god will have extraordinary achievements in the future once he absorbs such a powerful divine light. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said with slight surprise, "Could it be that the 6 ancient gods are worried that someone will surpass them and do something to the divine light?" Songyan Xian and Ji Yu looked at each other in shock. They didn't expect to hear such a secret of the god realm. Just based on this secret, Songyan Xian felt that it was worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. Granny Yin snorted coldly. One of the important reasons is that they are worried about being surpassed by the younger generation. What's more despicable is that they actually take the divine light for themselves. Every time a powerful divine light descends, the 6 ancient gods won't summon the person who is supposed to be conferred as a god to absorb the divine light that belongs to him. Instead, they quietly arrange for their descendants to come to the conferred God mountain to absorb the divine light and create an expert that belongs to their own tribe. F***ck. They're really despicable. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. His expression twitched as he clicked his tongue. It seems like there are bastards who abuse their power for personal gain everywhere. They take all the benefits that belong to others. What about others? Others? Whether others live or die is not something they consider at all. Granny Yin snorted and said with a sarcastic expression, "The 6 of them have already agreed that if the divine light belongs to one of their 6 tribes, then the other 5 tribes have no right to share it. If it doesn't belong to any one of the 6 tribes, then the 6 tribes will each choose one person from their tribe to come to the conferred God mountain to share the divine light. Of course, if the divine light is pitifully small, it won't be able to forge a divine body if it is shared by 6 disciples of the 6 tribes. Under such circumstances, the 6 ancient gods will find the corresponding person from the lower realm to absorb it. Damn it! No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. Are the 6 ancient gods really willing to give it up?" Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but mock. Granny Yin shook her head and said, "You just don't know. It's not that the 6 ancient gods want to give up, but if the divine essence is too little, it can only help one person forge a divine body. If the disciples of the 6 races share it, not only will they not be able to forge a divine body, but it will also harm them. This was because once you absorbed the divine essence, no matter how much you absorbed, you wouldn't be able to absorb any more even if you were given another chance. Usually, the amount of divine essence you absorb represents the level of your future achievements. Anyway, it won't pose any threat to the people of the lower realm, even if they absorb it. Hence, under the situation where none of the 6 ancient gods wanted to let the other party take advantage of them, they gave the cultivators of the lower realm a chance to become a god. The most important thing is that although Tao doesn't care about what they are doing, it doesn't mean that Tao doesn't know what they are doing. The 6 ancient gods can't be too greedy. If they don't give any chance to the people of the lower realm, Tao might bring along the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god to deal with them one day. That would be more than enough for them to see. Although the 6 ancient gods have the advantage in numbers, I'm afraid that no one has the confidence to deal with that mysterious Tao, let alone the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "It's a pity that Tao created the rule of ascension for mortals, immortals and gods. It was originally a good intention to let everyone go their own way, but unfortunately, it was destroyed by the greed of a few people. I can't figure it out. Tao created this system, but why didn't he participate in it? He also didn't let the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan, who are loyal to him, participate in it. With the participation and supervision of these 2 clans, the 6 ancient gods wouldn't be so unscrupulous to this extent. Could it be that Tao, has always been indifferent to it and didn't interfere in it? Granny Yin pondered slightly and said, I don't know why, and no one can figure out why. Yu Qianqiu suddenly thought of something and said strangely, according to this, it means that there should be some people in the lower realm who have reached the qualification to become a god, but haven't ascended to the divine realm. But why have I never heard of these people? With their ability, they should not be unknown people. Could it be that they have been killed by someone? That's not true. Speaking of those who were deprived of the opportunity to become a god, Granny Yin couldn't help but sigh and said, I heard from Ming that someone accidentally found a cultivation space in the Netherworld River in the Netherworld that the great god Coiling Dragon had opened. Although it was a space that had been abandoned for a long time, it was said that the great god Coiling Dragon had cultivated in it. For those who had no way to ascend to the divine realm, it was tantamount to finding the way to the divine realm. They treated it as a treasure land and gathered in it to cultivate, almost reluctant to come out. A cultivation space opened by the great god Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld River. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback and said, Xinyu, who was on the flying shuttle, also couldn't help but let out an ah. The two of them looked at each other and obviously guessed something. Grey Cloud Xian looked at the two of them in confusion. He didn't know why the two of them were so surprised. Granny Yin also glanced at the two of them and asked, What's wrong? Do the two of you know that place too? Yu Qianqiu looked at Xinyu again and guessed that the other party had the same guess as him. He then replied, I heard that there is a mysterious place in the Netherworld River, and there are almost godlike experts in it. It is called the Netherworld Spirit Mansion. I wonder if it is the cultivation space abandoned by the great god Coiling Dragon that you mentioned, Granny? You really are a knowledgeable person. It seems that there is no secret in the lower realm that you don't know. I only knew about it from Ming. Granny Yin nodded with admiration and said, That's right. The place that Ming mentioned was named the Netherworld Spirit Mansion by the people who gathered there. Grey Cloud Xian took a deep breath, and his face was full of shock. He didn't expect that there were so many godlike experts in the Netherworld. He felt that it was really worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. He actually knew such a big secret. If he brought this news back to the Passionless Palace, it would definitely be a great contribution. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. After thinking for a while, he changed the topic and asked, So, did the demon god massacre the god realm because the divine essence that belonged to him was divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods? But that's not right. If it was divided, how could he ascend to the god realm and become a demon god? That's because the demon god Yi was too powerful. Granny Yin shook her head and sighed. I only managed to figure out the whole story of that storm after I combined it with what little Xian's mother, Ming, had told me about the lower realm. It's a mistake to classify Ming as a peerless genius like Zhang and Yi. In fact, although Ming has the cultivation of an early-stage small god, he is still far from the level where he can be conferred as a god. In the lower realm, only Zhang and Yi can be called peerless geniuses. With their abilities, even in the god realm, they are absolute masters and have long reached the level of being conferred as a god. But it's a pity that the two of them stayed in the lower realm and didn't know anything about the god realm, as their divine essence was too powerful. The divine essence that belonged to them had naturally been divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods. Zhang and Yi were originally friends. Their cultivation was rare in the world. Although the latter was a little stronger than the former, the difference was not too big. It's funny that the two of them didn't know anything about the god realm. They still appreciated each other and became good friends, working together to pursue the path to become a god. Later on, the two of them met Ming. Ming was a rare beauty in the world, and her cultivation was also extraordinary. It made the two of them fall in love with Ming at first sight. And Ming was also amazed by their high cultivation and was very happy to become friends with them. As the saying goes, time breeds love. Not only did the two men fall in love with Ming, even Ming also developed feelings for Zhang. Naturally, the two of them got together. However, the two of them had scruples about Ye's feelings and had been secretly working together. On the surface, They maintained their previous relationship and were ready to find the right opportunity to tell Yi. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, since the cultivation of Yi is higher than that of Zheng, why did Ming choose Zheng and not Yi? I also asked Ming this question, but Ming said that it's because Ye's character is too clear about love and hate. If he likes something, then he likes it. If he doesn't like it, then he doesn't like it. It can even be described as extreme. In fact, Yi originally had a wife and a child. But after meeting Ming, Yi brazenly killed his wife in front of Ming to show his determination to Ming. Granny Yin smiled bitterly and said, Ming was frightened at that time. I didn't expect Yi to be so cruel. Think about it, how could Ming be with Yi? If Yi falls in love with another woman in the future, wouldn't she follow in the footsteps of Ye's ex-wife? Lunatic. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself. He couldn't help but think of Bai Changchun, who abandoned his family and son. He wondered if all the real experts had similar tendencies. Granny Yin continued. Yi didn't know about the other couple. He felt that it wasn't a good idea for the three of them to continue like this. There was only one Ming. And in the end, she could only be with one man. So he secretly looked for Zheng and proposed a solution. He asked for them to cultivate in seclusion together. Whoever obtained the qualification to ascend to godhood first would give up the competition for Ming. In the face of such a ridiculous method, Justice can completely reject it because Dark has already secretly cooperated with him. At the very least, Dark has the right to make her own choice. It's not up to the two men to gamble with her life. However, a person who could reach the level of Zheng was naturally a proud person. He didn't think that he was weaker than his opponent. In the end, he was provoked by Yi and agreed to the bet with Yi behind Ming. Don't you think such a man is a fool? Chapter 1065. At that time, the lower realm was actually very chaotic. In order to find a quiet place to cultivate, the two men joined hands and opened up a huge space with their powerful cultivation. It was a huge space that was not smaller than the immortal realm, which later became the demon realm. However, it was precisely because of the earth-shattering actions of the two bastards that the 6 ancient gods who looked down on the lower realm were alarmed, and all their attention was focused on them. The 6 ancient gods didn't expect that there would be an expert who could open up a new world in the lower realm. They felt that if these two people were to be left alone, they would be a big trouble in the future. Hence, they decided to eradicate these two people. However, there was a bottom line set by Tao in the god realm that the 6 ancient gods didn't dare to trample on. Tao once said that if anyone from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm without permission, he would be destroyed and would never be able to reincarnate. Although no one from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm, it didn't mean that the 6 ancient gods didn't have any way to deal with it. Hence, they secretly contacted the rulers of the immortal realm and the underworld, as well as the god-level experts in the netherworld palace, who couldn't ascend to the god realm, and asked them to gather their forces to eradicate Jing and Yi. Hence, a turmoil that affected the lower realm began. The devil path led by Yi and the demon path led by Zheng suddenly suffered a heavy blow from the immortal realm and the underworld. There were also the experts in the netherworld palace, who were eyeing them covetously. The 2 experts who led the monster path and demon path naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. They immediately launched a strong counterattack. Zheng handed over the command of the group of demons to Yi. Yi led the monster path and Zheng led the monster path, and attacked the immortal realm and the underworld so hard that they couldn't fight back. Zheng and Ming guarded the exit of the netherworld palace. They beat the god-level experts inside so hard that they didn't dare to come out. This allowed Yi to quickly kill the immortal realm and the underworld without any worries. After dealing with the immortal realm and the netherworld, Night was preparing to completely eradicate the hidden danger in the netherworld palace, when the 6 great ancient gods of the god realm were furious. It was impossible for them to unify the lower realm and have a huge force that could fight against the god realm. Coincidentally, at this time, a divine light descended from the seal of God Mountain, and 2 god positions appeared. The 6 great ancient gods immediately took this opportunity to send their god envoys to the lower realm, preparing to summon Yi and Zheng to the divine realm, and then slowly deal with them. Zheng and Yi didn't expect that they would suddenly have the opportunity to ascend to the god realm. Although they were happy, they were also worried about their gains and losses. There were only 2 places to ascend to the god realm, and Dark didn't have the chance. Neither of them could let go of Dark. After Ming found out about this, she didn't want the 2 of them to waste this rare opportunity because of her. So she persuaded the 2 of them to go to the divine world first and wait for her there. She said that she would definitely cultivate diligently, and sooner or later, she would also ascend to the divine world. At that time, the 3 of them would meet again in the divine world. Who knew that at this time, the 2 men actually decided to give up the rare opportunity to ascend to the divine world and stayed to accompany Dark. At this time, Zheng naturally didn't want to delay Night anymore, so he told her about his relationship with Dark. He said that it was he who should stay to accompany Dark, and asked Night to cherish this rare opportunity to go to the divine world. However, Night's character is very easy to go to extremes. After knowing the truth of the matter, he immediately flew into a rage. He thought that Zheng had secretly colluded with Dark to open up a new world with him, and was playing with him. In his rage, Night brazenly attacked Zheng. Not to mention that Zheng was not a match for Dark at that time. Zheng also felt guilty and was not prepared for it. He was seriously injured on the spot. When the devil god is angry, no one can stop him. Then, Night brazenly killed Zheng, who was seriously injured, regardless of Dark's desperate attempts to stop him. Not only that, Night didn't let it go. He even stripped away Zheng's primordial spirit and annihilated it. He didn't even give Zheng a chance to be reincarnated. It can be seen how crazy Night's stubborn character is. He turned against a friend of many years just like that. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes that appeared in the sky in Lingfang Valley. Sure enough, it was filled with the smell of killing. But thinking of this, he couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. Since the devil god already had the strength to open up a space, in addition to that pair of cold and ruthless divine eyes that could lock on what happened in the human world at any time, he couldn't help but say doubtfully, "I've heard that there are almighty people who can open up a passage from one world to another at any time. Could it be that the devil god, who could open up a space at that time, still couldn't open up a passage to the divine realm?" Granny Yin shook her head and said, "Not only does Night have the ability to open up a passage to the divine realm, even Zheng has the same ability. But it's not as easy as you think to open up a passage from one world to another. It's easy to open up a passage, but you don't know where the destination is. In other words, you don't even know where the divine realm is. So what's the use of opening up a passage at random? Can you step into the divine realm just by opening up a space passage? Who dares to rush in blindly without knowing where the end of the broken void is? If that's the case, you might sink into the endless void forever and be devoured by an inexplicable force. If you don't know the way, you won't be able to enter. No matter how much effort you put in, it's all for naught. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding and asked again, "What happened after that?" Grey Cloud Xian and Xinyu stood on the flying shuttle and listened attentively. Being fortunate enough to hear these words, not only did it increase their knowledge, it was also greatly beneficial to their future cultivation. Granny Yin raised her hand and touched Taishu Jing's tombstone with a sigh. After Zheng was killed, Ming collected his corpse and threatened to Night to take revenge on him. Night was still angry and immediately kidnapped her, wanting to bring Ming to the divine realm. He wanted the 2 of them to be together forever, saying that no one could take anything away from him. The messenger from the divine realm didn't expect such a thing to happen. He didn't expect that the 2 targets he wanted to eliminate would actually kill each other. One of them died so easily. After the shock, not only did he not get angry, but he happily took care of both of them and brought them to the divine realm. After arriving at the divine realm, Night found that the divine realm wasn't as beautiful as he imagined. The entire divine realm was obviously the exclusive land of the ancient gods. As an outsider, he didn't have much power, and was even ostracized on the way to the God-sealing mountain. Especially when he heard the secret ridicule from the descendants of the 6 great clans. Only then did he understand that he and Zheng should have ascended to the God realm a long time ago, and the divine splendor that belonged to the 2 of them had long been divided by the others. Now what was given to him was what was left of the others. Night and Ming were chased into the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. Looking at the 2 divine splendors that fell from the sky, although they were beautiful and dazzling, they were 2 thin rays. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and loosen the restriction on Ming. 2 former friends, but now enemies, faced each other alone in the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. One of them cursed angrily, while the other shook his head and smiled bitterly. At that time, Ming had the idea of committing suicide, so she spoke incoherently. She actually said that she was pregnant with Zheng's flesh and blood. As expected, Night was enraged and was restrained by Night once again. However, Night didn't kill her. He only whispered in her ear that if he didn't guess wrongly, once the 2 of them absorbed the 2 beams of divine essence, they would definitely be persecuted after going through this process. To Ming's surprise, Night brought her under the 2 rays of divine splendor and used the heaven-defying demonic reversal technique to help Ming absorb the 2 rays of divine splendor into her body. After that, Night told Ming that if you really hate me that much, then you should live well and save your life to take revenge on me. Ming didn't understand what Night meant when Night slapped her stomach and killed the fetus in her stomach. Night said to the grief-stricken Ming again, "I'm sorry. I had no choice but to do this. I didn't have the confidence to escape with you. Only by letting them know that you and I are complete opposites can you have a chance to live. Remember, if you want to take revenge for Zheng and the dead fetus in your stomach, then you must live well." When they heard this, all of them were moved and couldn't help but look at each other. The demonic god Night was neither good nor evil. It was hard to tell if he was a good person or a bad person. It even made the 3 of them feel suffocated. Night really escaped from the sealed god's forbidden land? Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask. If he didn't escape, how could the current demonic god exist? Granny Yin nodded indifferently and said, "Indeed, he single-handedly fought his way out of the sealed god's forbidden land and escaped. The guards outside the forbidden land didn't expect to encounter such a ferocious desperado. However, at that time, Night's cultivation was not high enough to move unhindered in the immortal world. Immediately, there were countless experts who chased after him. One can well imagine what happened to him. Although he killed many of those who chased after him, he was forced to break all 4 of his limbs along the way. He had to use the blood escape art 4 times before he was able to escape. It could be said to be extremely tragic. Those who saw it with their own eyes were all shocked. Later on, when they recalled it, they would still be moved. However, his ability was indeed extraordinary. I can't help but admire him. So many people couldn't stop him, and he escaped in the end. After that, the 6 clans led by the 6 ancient gods almost searched the entire divine world, but they couldn't find his hiding place. They also didn't know where he was hiding. Fortunately, under his ruthless actions he made the right bet. Ming really managed to keep her life. Chapter 1066. Actually, there's another important reason why I was able to stay alive. It's because Night made too much noise and attracted the attention of the Dragon tribe and the Phoenix tribe. The people of the 6 tribes didn't do anything to her because they were afraid of her. They even gave her the title of God of the Underworld. But it's impossible for her to be treated well. Not only did she not get a territory, she didn't even get a place to live. Granny Yin turned around and pointed at the grave on the other side. Although my old man has been conferred the title of Moon God, he's actually not well received in the tribe. Ming was randomly assigned to stay here with me and my wife, and he'll suffer the disdain of others together with us. Yu Qianqiu was surprised and said, "You are also from the 6 tribes of the realm of gods?" "Yes, we are the descendants of the ancient god of light." When Granny Yin said this, a sarcastic expression flashed across her face. It seemed that she didn't want to have too much to do with that tribe. She changed the topic and continued. After dark came here, we were all ignored and looked down upon. Maybe it's because we share the same fate. We got along very well. After that, dark lived in seclusion and almost didn't show up in the outside world. She used a meditation method to transform the dead fetus in her belly into a ghost fetus and continued to be pregnant. Although the fetus grew up very slowly, it was indeed a kind of magical technique. The three looked at each other and didn't expect such a magical thing. Needless to say, they knew that the ghost fetus in Dark's belly was Taishu Xian, the current underworld saintess. This must be the strange birth of Taishu Xian, who was born with the underworld body that Granny Yin mentioned before. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed. Little Xian, who was born with the underworld body, was finally born. It was a happy event in the Cold Moon Palace. However, the birth of Xianlas seemed to herald the arrival of a bloody storm in the God realm. When Xianlas was just able to walk, Ming, who had never left the Moon Palace, took Xianlas out of the Moon Palace for the first time for her daughter's sake. She wanted to let Xianlas experience the outside world. At that time, I accompanied her. However, as soon as I went out, I got into big trouble because of Dark's beauty. In a beautiful place, Ming saw that there were few people around, so she removed the veil that covered her face so that it would be easier for her to play with her daughter, who knew that she would bump into the descendant of the ancient light god, Qingyang, passing by with a group of people. When Qingyang first saw Ming's appearance, he was stunned. He actually said that he wanted Ming to be his concubine. We obviously wouldn't agree. We also knew that we weren't their match, so we could only run for our lives. Just as we were being chased by them to the point where we had nowhere to run, we suddenly saw a murderous aura in the distant sky. Black demonic clouds blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they surged over. Such a powerful aura stunned us and our pursuers. We even thought that an ancient god was passing by. Only Ming stared at the sky and gnashed his teeth as he said, "He's here." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. I saw a man standing in the demonic clouds in the sky. His entire body was covered by a black waistcoat. A fierce and austere aura surged out from his body and filled the heaven and earth. It made people shudder. One of his hands reached out from the waistcoat, and there was a black crystal ball in his palm. He looked down coldly and said, "Ming, I felt your fear, so I came out of seclusion in advance. Tell me, who made you so afraid?" Granny Yan's eyes were confused. She sank into endless memories. She said with an abnormally complicated expression. After hearing this, although I haven't seen Night before, I immediately guessed that this person was him. Qingyang, whose interest was disturbed, immediately asked who he was. Night replied indifferently, "I'm a demonic god." Qingyang asked the people around him who the demonic god was, but they all said that they had never heard of him. In reality, Night really wasn't conferred the title of demon god back then. Qingyang asked him who it was that gave him the title of demon god, but Night said that no one else had the right to confer the title on him. He was the one who gave it to himself. That made Qingyang and the others laugh aloud. Without a doubt, they relaxed after learning that Night had no background. Qingyang's lackeys immediately used the ancient god of light as a background and told Night to piss off and stop disturbing their hunt. After learning that Qingyang wanted Ming to be his concubine, Night's demonic nature was immediately triggered. A huge hand reached out from the demonic clouds beneath his feet and grabbed Qingyang into the clouds effortlessly. The others wanted to save Qingyang, but they were all instantly reduced to dust by the huge hand condensed from the roiling demonic clouds beneath Night's feet. They could not even fight back at all. The one who suffered the most was Qingyang. Who knows what he did to him, but he was bound by the demonic clouds beneath Night's feet. Not only was he unable to break free, but his flesh and blood were also devoured by the vicious, sharp-toothed ghost heads conjured by the demonic clouds. Qingyang's miserable cries under Night's feet were ear-piercing. He no longer looked like a human. He had basically gone through all kinds of torture. Night said that he wanted to make Qingyang suffer a fate worse than death. He wanted to suffer the demon devouring for all eternity under his feet, never to be reborn. Before long, the weather and the surroundings changed. Night looked at the surging clouds and said that his presence had already alarmed quite a few experts. Someone was hurrying over, so he told us to retreat for now. Meanwhile, he wanted to bathe the god world in blood for revenge from 1,000 years ago. Back then, I was so shocked by his demonic flames that I did not even dare to breathe loudly. Ming had no intention of saying anything else to him, so we quickly left. However, not long after we left, we suddenly heard Night's voice ripple through the god world. His tone was abnormally domineering and cold. I, demon god Night, have returned. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will die. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will be wiped out. From today onwards, I will bathe the entire god world in blood. From today onwards, the god world will no longer need the 6 great races. The 6 ancient gods will all die. They will use their lives to pay for your years of greed. From today onwards I, demon god Night, will put an end to everything. Light, your descendant Qingyang is begging for mercy under my feet. Why are you still cowardly and cowardly? Could it be that you don't dare to come out and fight me? When Yu Qianqiu and the others heard this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This demon god's tone was a little too arrogant. He actually wanted to go against the 6 great races, led by the 6 ancient gods. He even said that he wanted to bathe the entire god world in blood. He was too arrogant. Night's undisguised and deliberate words immediately shocked the entire god realm, and the curtains of a bloody battle were drawn. After that, we found out that the current Night was no longer the same as before. His demonic arts could be said to be omnipotent. He waited for the experts of the god world to gather at the place where he saved us. He did not run or avoid the battle. In that battle, he slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people from the 6 clans. Their corpses piled up like a mountain. He stood at the peak of that mountain of corpses and sea of blood. Under his feet, there was Qingyang, who was neither human nor ghost, screaming miserably day in and day out. Yu Qianqiu and the others were speechless. They imagined the scene at that time. How tall would it be when the corpses of hundreds of thousands of people were piled up? In the end, the experts of the 6 clans were killed to the point that they did not dare to come close. Night no longer needed anyone to confer him the title of demon god. Just the fact that he stood at the peak of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood, without anyone daring to touch him, was enough to make his name resound throughout the god world. Just as he said, no one was qualified to confer him the title of god. The 6 ancient gods never thought that the current Night would actually be so ferocious. Unless they personally took action, no one would be able to deal with this great evil. In the end, the ancient god Light was the first to lose his cool. Regardless of whether he had feelings for Qingyang or not, Qingyang was still his descendant. Now that he was being trampled by Night day and night, it was no different from a slap to his face. He had no choice but to save him. The ancient god of Light finally took action. Originally, everyone thought that Night was dead for sure this time. But in the end, everyone's jaws dropped. The ancient god of Light was actually forced to flee by night, and luckily managed to escape with his life. Night left the mountain of corpses and sea of blood, and chased after the ancient god of Light. Although he managed to escape, he barged into the territory of the ancient god of Light. He killed everyone on sight, regardless of gender or age. He massacred the descendants of the ancient god of Light, but the ancient god of Light did not dare to show himself to protect his own. With that, the title of demon god stood at the peak of the god world. With that, the 6 ancient gods could no longer sit still. They all regretted provoking this great evil. If the demon god only dealt with the Light clan, the others might have been intimidated by the demon god's methods and ignored him. However, the demon god had already spread the word that he wanted to deal with everyone in the 6 ancient gods. He wanted to massacre them all. With the cooperation of the ancient god of Light, the scene of the 6 ancient gods working together to fight the enemy appeared for the first time. They trapped the demon god, who was wantonly slaughtering people in the god world. The demon god did not run or hide, and took the battle head-on. A fierce battle that changed the color of the sky, and made the sun and moon lose their light, made the entire god world tremble. Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. His Adam's apple vibrated as he said, "What happened in the end?" Song Yin Xian and Shin Yu were confused. Of the 6 ancient gods, 2 were killed and 4 were injured. The demon god himself was also seriously injured. However, the remaining 4 ancient gods, including the ancient god of light, were chased by the demon god all over the god world. It seemed like the demon god would not stop until he killed them. Wherever he went, he would kill anyone he saw. His ferocity was simply hair-raising. In the end, the 4 ancient gods who could no longer fight were forced to flee into the territories of the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god respectively to seek help. I don't know if the 2 ancient gods who never participated in any battles helped them. However, after the demon god chased them into the territories of the 2 ancient gods, no one knew what was happening inside. When the demon god came out again, the 4 ancient gods also came out with their tails between their legs. The 5 of them went their separate ways and seemed to have resolved the battle between them. Therefore, some people guessed that the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god joined forces with the 4 ancient gods to suppress the demon god. Others said that it was the mysterious Tao who resolved the battle between the 5 of them. However, none of the people involved were willing to mention this matter. In short, no matter what the truth is, the demon god had already become the #1 expert in the god world in everyone's hearts by defeating 6 ancient gods alone. Chapter 1067. This result made the 3 of them sigh endlessly. Yu Qianqiu even felt his scalp go numb. He couldn't help but think of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes he saw in the sky above the Lingfang Valley. When he thought that Yin Juexing had such a powerful person behind him, he immediately felt extremely pressured. He didn't know whether it would be a blessing or a disaster in the end. How did it end up like this? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the graves on both sides, especially the grave of the moon god, and asked, "I can understand that Tai Shuzheng died a long time ago. Could it be that the moon god also participated in the battle against the demon god?" A miserable look flashed across Grandma Yan's face. She shook her head and said, "After the demon god defeated the 6 ancient gods, he came to the moon palace to look for Dark. When he heard the babbling Xian girl calling Dark mother, his expression changed drastically. He didn't expect that Dark could make a dead fetus become a ghost fetus. He thought that it was a child that Dark had with another man. So he immediately questioned Dark whose child was it. In order to anger him, Dark admitted that it was a child that she had with another man. Of course, she was also afraid that he wouldn't let go of the child after hearing that it was Zheng's daughter. The demon god knight was so angry that he laughed. He angrily scolded Dark for being shameless and Zheng dying for her. Then he asked which man's bastard child was it. Seeing that Dark didn't answer, his eyes immediately locked on the man standing beside her, who was my husband, the moon god. He thought that my husband was the man who had an affair with Dark. In a rage he attacked. Just think, how could my husband be a match for him? He died in his hands unjustly. Even if we wanted to save him, we couldn't do it in time. Until the demon god knight also wanted to kill Xian girl. Dark had no choice but to tell him about Xian girl's identity. If he wanted to kill them, he should kill them both. I don't know why, but after the demon god knight knew that Xian girl was Zheng's daughter, he didn't kill her. He just glanced at Xian girl a few more times before leaving. After that, Dark kept apologizing to me and kept apologizing. Then, the Phoenix clan sent a decree saying that the mausoleum of the god of sin, where only gods were buried, would be opened. Those who died in this disaster could be buried in the mausoleum of the god of sin. When I was disheartened and prepared to stay with my man in the mausoleum of the god of sin forever, Dark came to me with Xian. She entrusted Xian and Taishu Zheng's bodies to me, and asked me to bring them to the mausoleum of the god of sin together. She said that she would give her man and my man an explanation. To be honest, I hated her at that time. After all, my man died because of her. After I accepted Xian and Taishu Zheng's corpses, I secretly followed her to see how she was going to explain to her man and my man. In the end, I saw her self-destruct in front of the demon god knight, intending to perish together with the demon god. That earth-shattering bang completely woke me up from my hatred. However, the demon god knight's demonic power was too strong. Dark's self-destruction did not cause any damage to him. After the smoke dissipated, the demon god knight knelt at the place where Dark had self-destructed with a dispirited look. He was bleeding from his 7 apertures and howling endlessly. It was almost unbearable to look at. I wanted to wait for the demon god knight to leave, then take Xian to the place where her mother died for the last time. Then, I would take her away to the mausoleum of the god of sin and never come back. Unexpectedly, the demon god knight knelt there and howled for more than 3 days and 3 nights. I didn't dare to stay any longer. I was afraid that he would cause trouble for Xian when he woke up. So I took her to the mausoleum of the god of sin. It was not until the mausoleum of the god of sin was sealed again that I felt relieved. Then for so many years, I have been guarding the mausoleum with Xian. Who would have thought that Xian would keep asking me about her parents after she grew up? I wanted to hide it from her for the rest of her life. But one time, after she kept asking me, I thought that she would not be able to leave this place anyway. So I told her everything. However, not even in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that she would predict that there would come a time when the barrier of heavens would be lenient. After that, she left behind a jade archive, saying that she wanted to avenge her parents. Then she quietly left. I still regret this to this day. After listening to this dispute involving the high and mighty gods, the 3 of them fell silent. Who could say who was right and who was wrong? Even though the demon god was infamous for killing countless innocent people, who could say that he was the only one at fault? Time flew by like a fleeting cloud. The countless joys and sorrows brought about by the dispute between the gods might just be the beginning of a never-ending process. Granny, you don't need to feel guilty. Now Taishu Xian is living a good life in the netherworld. She wants to seek revenge on the demon god. To put it bluntly, I'm afraid that she doesn't even have the chance to come into contact with the demon god. How can she seek revenge? Yu Qianqiu sighed and comforted her. Knowing that these grudges would not affect Bai Suzhen's cultivation of the Myriad Demon's Heart Sutra, he felt a lot more at ease. After listening to these grudges that involved the heavenly realm, he also felt that there was no meaning in fighting and killing. But this was a cultivation path that could never be turned back once one set foot in it. If one did not actively prepare for it, one might suffer unbearable pain in the future. One could only continue on this path. There was no way to avoid it. I hope so. But the world is full of misfortunes, and no one can be certain. Grandma Yin looked at Yu Qianqiu with a gentle gaze and smiled faintly. I have told you everything that needs to be said. Since you and Xian are close friends, then do me a favor. Help me persuade her to come back after you leave this place. What a joke. She is the underworld saintess. How am I qualified to persuade her? I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to even see her. Yu Qianqiu coughed awkwardly and said, Grandma, in my opinion, let's just let nature take its course. If she wants to come back, she will naturally come back. If she doesn't want to come back, even if you catch her and bring her back. As he spoke, he looked at Jiu Yu and continued, unless you keep an eye on her all the time, she will still find a way to get out. Jiu Yu looked at Grandma Yin with trepidation after hearing his words. He could enter and exit the barrier of heavens at will. If Grandma Yin used him to find Taishu Xian, would she kill him to stop Taishu Xian from leaving this place again? After pondering for a while, Grandma Yin nodded slightly and said, You are right. Maybe when she is really tired outside, she will naturally come back. Otherwise, if her heart is outside, even if I forcibly catch her back, it will be no different from torture to her. A person who cannot calm down will not be able to stay here forever. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief and cupped his hands at her. Don't worry, Grandma. If I see her, I will definitely tell her that you miss her very much. He was about to bid farewell. Grandma Yin smiled and nodded. Okay, I won't see you off. I hope you can find the person you are looking for. Goodbye. Yu Qianqiu bowed and flashed to the flying shuttle. Grey Cloud Xian, and Jiu Yu also bowed and bid farewell. Then, under Grandma Yan's nod and smile, the flying shuttle flew away. The flying shuttle traveled southward under the bright moonlight. From time to time, The gazes of the three people swept across the vast land where the gods were buried. They were all silent. Their minds could not help but return to the grudges of the gods that Grandma Yin had told them. For a moment they felt so small. After a long time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, Jiuyu, do you know where that old Meng is? I don't know. Jiuyu shook his head and continued to explain. However, most of the tombs here are buried in the center of the cemetery. There are very few people like Granny Yen, who have their tombs buried close to the celestial boundary formation. If I see a tomb along the way to the south, it should be the tomb of old Meng. Damn it! Why didn't you say so earlier? If I knew you didn't know, I would have asked Grandma Yen. Yu Qianqiu said gloomily. Yu Qianqiu. It seems that you have a lot of secrets. Grey Cloud Xian suddenly spoke. He turned back to look at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. You really seem to know the underworld saintess. What I'm curious about is, when have you seen the underworld saintess? I refuse to answer. Yu Qianqiu retorted without hesitation. Grey Cloud Xian choked and was speechless. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu was already thinking about how he knew too many secrets. Because he had killed his grandson, it was impossible for him to reconcile with him. Therefore, he was thinking about how to get rid of him. After flying in silence for a whole day, the three of them stood on the flying shuttle and stared in three different directions. Suddenly, there was a loud boom in front of them. They could feel the ground shaking in the air. There were experts fighting. The flying shuttle suddenly stopped. The three of them looked at each other and suddenly heard someone shouting angrily in the distance. Old thief! Don't run if you have the guts! Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched and he said in a deep voice, Let's go! Let's go and take a look. The other two also vaguely guessed something. Grey Cloud Xian hesitated for a while, but he still drove the flying shuttle in the direction of the battle. Not long after, the three of them saw that under the silvery moonlight, there were huge potholes everywhere. In front of them, there was a hill that was miraculously preserved. They could vaguely see a tomb that was exactly the same as the one they saw at Grandma Yan's. At the top of the hill, there was a stone house built on the slope. Although it was simple, it was slightly more majestic than Grandma Yan's stone house. Apart from the hill, the surrounding areas had indeed been destroyed to the point of being unrecognizable. Grey Cloud Xian drove the flying shuttle and maintained a distance, not daring to approach. What a joke! They did not know this person. Moreover, the angry shout just now was filled with sparks of gunpowder. The other party was so angry. How could they trespass on his territory? May I ask if this is Senior Meng's residence? Yu Qianqiu shouted in the direction of the hill. In the end, there was no response even after shouting a few times. The three of them looked at each other and reckoned that the person should have left. Perhaps he went to chase after someone. At this moment, a stream of light appeared in front of them in the blink of an eye. The speed was so fast that it gave the three of them a fright. A gray-robed old man with his hair tied up in a slanted bun appeared. He looked at the three of them angrily and asked with a choking voice, Who are you? Why did you trespass here? Chapter 1068. Seeing that the other party's hair was crooked from anger, the three of them looked at each other. They were almost certain that this was Old Man Meng, who was annoyed by the harassment. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said, May I ask if you are Senior Meng? Seeing that the other party actually knew who he was, the old man's angry expression eased a little, and he said in a deep voice, That's me. What's the matter? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he chuckled and said, We were introduced by Grandma Yin from the north. We heard that Senior Meng encountered some trouble, so Grandma Yin asked us to come and see if there's anything we can help with. Grandma Yin introduced you? Old Man Meng was stunned, and he immediately checked the cultivation of the three of them. As a result, the corner of his mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer, as if to say, how could the three of them be of any help with their cultivation? He took out a jade talisman, and after entering a spell into it, he crushed the jade talisman into powder. The three of them understood that the other party was obviously doubting the authenticity of their identity, and he might even be verifying it with Grandma Yin. The three of them could not help but feel lucky that they had a good relationship with Grandma Yen, and it should not ruin their business. After a while, Old Man Ming looked at the three of them and nodded slightly. All right. I'm annoyed by that old thief. The three of you can act as hidden sentries at the edge of the all heavens boundary. When you see him, immediately send me a message, lest I lose sight of him. As he spoke, he took out another 3 jade talismans and flicked them into the hands of the three of them. Sure. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade talismans generously, and then asked with a trace of suspicion. I heard from Grandma Yin that that person wants to rob the tomb of the god of sin guarded by Senior. May I ask Senior, why does he want to rob the tomb? Could it be that there are some treasures hidden in the tomb? At the mention of this, Old Man Ming's face suddenly collapsed, and he said with a hideous expression, I've met a madman. At first, I thought he wanted to rob the tomb, but later on, I understood that he was using me to practice and improve his cultivation. Every time I chased him away, I found that his cultivation had increased a little when I fought him again. The speed at which his cultivation increased was monstrous. If this continues, I'll sooner or later be defeated by him. I must seize the opportunity to eliminate him before he becomes powerful. Otherwise, I'll definitely be humiliated one day. It's truly infuriating. Sigh. It was like Old Man Bai's style. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He smiled awkwardly and said, Since Senior knows the reason, why did you still fight with him? If you don't fight with him, he won't have the chance to improve his cultivation. You think I want to fight him? If I liked fighting and killing, would I have come to the mausoleum of the god of sin to guard the tomb? The key is that if I don't fight with him, that madman will really dig up the tomb. Even if I can watch him dig up the tomb and not do anything, if you don't fight with him, he'll take the initiative to attack you. Am I supposed to just stand there and let him beat me? Old Man Ming roared like a madman. Even though he was a few meters away, his spittle was almost splattered all over the faces of the three of them. The bun on the back of his head swayed back and forth in anger. It seemed like he was about to break down from the torture. After spitting, he seemed to have realized that there was no need to lose his temper with the three of them. He waved his hand and pointed in the direction of the all heavens boundary, saying, The three of you, split up and guard the edge of the all heavens boundary. Once you find that green-robed old thief, immediately send a message to me. Okay, we'll go now. Yu Qianqiu called out to his companions, and Songyan Xian immediately flew in the direction of the all heavens boundary on the flying shuttle. The huge moon hung high in the sky, and the bright moonlight shone on the earth as tranquil as water. After getting away from Old Man Meng, Songyan Xian couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianqiu, why are you looking for that person? Could it be that you really want to help Old Man Meng take care of that person? You have to think this through. Even with Old Man Meng's cultivation, he's a headache. He's not someone we can afford to provoke. Shen Yu nodded in agreement. What a joke. We're looking for him, not provoking him. Yu Qianqiu snickered. Finding Old Man Meng first was just to confirm how to find that person. Now that we have a way, we'll leave this place immediately after we find that person. We won't meet Old Man Meng again, so there's no need to worry too much. But I still have to stay here in the future. Shen Yu mumbled weakly. However, he had no human rights, and no one responded to his words. He looked miserable. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing silently on the flying shuttle, would look at the surroundings from time to time. He often wondered what was so strange about the mausoleum of the god of sin that could block his ability to sense the silver balls that Bai Changchun carried in Utopia. He was sure that the silver balls that he gave to Bai Changchun were still with him and had been brought into the boundary formation. Otherwise, he would have sensed the silver balls. If he could sense their whereabouts, he wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. After spending nearly an entire day, the three of them finally arrived in front of the cliff. On one side, the stars and moon shone brightly on the earth, while on the other side, it was completely dark. In the darkness ahead was the boundary formation that was filled with an inexplicable power. After putting away the flying shuttle, Yu Qianqiu pointed to the left and right and said, Old Song, find a place to wait on the left. Shen Yu, find a place to wait on the right. I'll wait here. When you see him, just bring him to me. Sungyeon Exan was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He said in shock. Are you kidding me? Who do you think he is? Do you think the two of us can bring him here just because we say so? Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and smiled. That's true. He's not as easy to talk to as I am. If you dare to make irresponsible remarks in front of him, you'll definitely suffer. Don't worry. As soon as you see him, immediately shout Yu Qianqiu. When he hears you shout my name, he'll naturally come to you to ask what's going on. There shouldn't be a problem if you bring him here. At the very least, he'll give you time to send a message to me and wait for me to find him. At the very least, if you say my name, at least he won't hurt you. Sungyeon Exan and Shinyu looked at each other. The former asked suspiciously, What's the use of saying your name? Is this for real? Are you familiar with him? Don't ask anymore. You'll know the result when the time comes. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Go quickly. If you miss the chance to meet him, the immortal emperor's wedding is not far away. We don't have time to delay anymore. After a moment of hesitation, the two of them split up and flew in different directions doubtfully. Yu Qianqiu stood alone in the same spot, rubbing his hands excitedly. He looked up at the big moon in the sky and hoped that he could pull Bai Changchun to the immortal world to support him. 3 days passed by unwittingly in the midst of waiting. In a desolate stone forest, Shinyu carefully hid in it and silently observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw the air in the all-heavens boundary ripple like water in front of him. A thin old man in a green robe broke through the rippling air and slid out of the all-heavens boundary, like he was standing on the bow of a ship riding the wind and waves. The thin but spirited old man in a green robe floated under the stars and moon, his eyes shining brightly as he looked around. Shinyu immediately guessed that this was the person Yu Qianqiu wanted him to find. However, when he saw this person, his heart couldn't help but tremble. This person's eyes were filled with an indomitable sharpness. That skinny yet sonorous aura made it seem as if this person could rip him apart with just his gaze. His intuition from many years of hiding told him that this person was very dangerous. Therefore, he threw Yu Qianqiu's instructions to the back of his mind and subconsciously wanted to hide first. His head shrank slightly and his body hunched, trying to hide behind the rugged stone pillar. As for what would happen next, he would think about it later. He didn't want to take any life-threatening risks. However, before half of his head could completely hide behind the stone pillar, his clothes lightly brushed against a protruding stone. One of his eyes, which had not hidden behind the stone pillar in time, immediately saw the other party suddenly staring at him. The divine gaze was like electricity piercing one's heart, and the substantial divine sense was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, cleanly and neatly sweeping through the terrain of the entire stone forest. Shinyu was shocked. Without saying anything, he wanted to turn around and teleport away. However, just as he was about to turn around, the air around him suddenly froze, and a strong pressure pressed down on him on the spot. He couldn't move at all. At this moment, it was difficult to even move a single step with all his cultivation, let alone teleport away. He immediately panicked. It was only at this moment that he thought of using Yu Qianqiu's name to try and save his life. However, his lungs were already being squeezed to the point of bursting, let alone opening his mouth to speak. Even his right to explain had been taken away in an instant. The thin green-robed elder slowly descended from the sky in front of him. He looked him up and down and said indifferently, Why are you sneaking around here and spying on me? As soon as the elder asked this, Shinyu immediately found that the strong pressure pressing down on his lungs had disappeared. Although he still couldn't move, at least he could breathe and speak. He didn't say anything to explain and panted as he said, Yu Qianqiu, Yu Qianqiu. It was Yu Qianqiu who asked me to wait for you here. This thin green-robed elder was none other than Bai Changchun, who was injured by the emperor of the underworld and fled here. Hearing the other party say Yu Qianqiu's name as soon as he opened his mouth, even though he had always been calm, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. The other party had said Yu Qianqiu's name 3 times in a row, so he naturally didn't hear it wrong. But what he couldn't figure out was why Yu Qianqiu would arrange someone here to wait for him. Wasn't this disciple of his too powerful? He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu's magical power couldn't be connected to this place. After frowning and thinking for a while, he shook his hand in his sleeve, and a small handful of silver balls appeared in his palm. He nodded slightly thoughtfully. He thought that Yu Qianqiu had found his whereabouts because of these silver balls, but he couldn't break into the powerful boundary formation of all heavens. So he arranged someone to wait for him here. Could it be that something had happened for him to be in such a hurry to find him? The moment Bai Changchun kept the silver balls in his hand, the strong pressure around him disappeared. Xin Yu immediately felt relaxed, and his whole body swayed as if he was drunk. Chapter 1069. It was not a good feeling to be almost crushed to the point of exploding, but to be completely relaxed in an instant. Ji Yu steadied himself and looked up at the other party. The other party asked, "Did Yu Qianqiu ask you to come?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu's name could really save his life, Xin Yu didn't have any other thoughts. He nodded and said, Yes. He asked me to wait for you here. He said to say his name when I see you, so." Bai Changchun would not listen to him and interrupted, "He's here too. He's over there." Just as Ji Yu raised his hand and pointed, he saw a blur in front of him. His clothes tightened around his waist, and the wind whistled in his ears. He was dragged away by the other party. Yu Qianqiu, who had been staring in the direction of the all-heavens boundary for the past few days, suddenly turned his head to the right and saw a green light whistling over. When it approached, it threw out a black shadow, which immediately scared him. Bang! Xin Yu cried out in pain and struggled to get up from the ground. Then, Bai Changchun appeared in front of him and looked at him from head to toe. Yu Qianqiu looked at Xin Yu in a daze. He didn't know how he had offended Bai Changchun, causing him to make such an entrance. However, he didn't have time to think about it. He bowed to Bai Changchun and said, "Disciple greets master." "Master?" Ji Yu, who had just gotten up, was stunned. He looked at the two in surprise. So he was his master. No wonder he said his name would be useful. Bai Changchun nodded and frowned. "Why are you here?" "I heard that master was injured by Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi and escaped here. So, I wanted to see how master's injuries were. However, this place is very strange. So I tried my best to find master." Yu Qianqiu briefly described what happened after he arrived in the immortal world, and how he found this place. He used voice transmission because Ji Yu was present, and some secrets were not convenient to be revealed. Naturally, Xin Yu could tell that the two of them were avoiding him through voice transmission. He didn't dare to have any opinions, so he obediently stood by the side and didn't say a word. After listening to Yu Qianqiu's story, Bai Changchun couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu in amazement. He didn't expect his disciple to have such a rich and bizarre experience. Suddenly, he stared at Xin Yu with a strange gaze, sending chills down Xin Yu's spine. He wondered what bad things Yu Qianqiu had said about him. Just as Xin Yu shrunk his neck, he saw Bai Changchun's hand grabbing at the void and pulling Xin Yu into the air. Xin Yu was so shocked that he screamed, "Yu Qianqiu, save me! Master!" Yu Qianqiu was about to plead for Xin Yu, but Bai Changchun raised his hand and lifted Xin Yu in the air. He said indifferently, "The power of the all-heavens boundary is not to be underestimated. I want to see how this little demon can enter and exit freely." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw Jiu Yu into the all-heaven boundary formation hundreds of meters away with a whoosh. The moment Xin Yu was thrown into the all-heavens boundary, his whole body was immediately shrouded in a layer of faint light, which was bright and dazzling in the dark night. Yu Qianqiu was speechless and dug his ears. It was not easy to reason with this old man. Xin Yu tumbled in the all-heavens boundary for a while. After he stabilized his body, he quickly flew out. Once he came out, the faint light shrouding his body immediately disappeared. Want to escape? He admitted that he did not have that ability, but he did not dare to approach that old monster in green robe again. The other party was too strong. If he wanted to make a move, he would not be able to resist at all. He was completely like a toy in the other party's hands. Therefore, he stood weakly on the edge of the cliff. He did not dare to leave, nor did he have the guts to approach. "It's really amazing. I didn't expect there to be someone here. who is not restricted by the all-heavens boundary. Bai Changchun stared at Xin Yu in the distance and exclaimed slightly. Then he turned around and asked, "Where is that song something? I want to see how his heartless palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style can dominate both the immortal and netherworld realms. I will summon him back now." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He took out a jade talisman and quickly crushed it to send a message. He was looking forward to the scene of Cong Yin Xian being abused. It would take some time for Cong Yin Xian to come back. Yu Qianqiu did not waste time and said respectfully to Bai Changchun, "Master, I heard some news about the devil god from another tombkeeper. Maybe it will be of some use to you in the future." He relayed the story that Grandma Yin told him in detail. He only hoped that his master, who was determined to fight with the devil god, would be careful. That was a real heaven's favored one. If there was a chance to meet him, he must not underestimate him. The #1 expert of the god world. Bai Changchun muttered in a low voice. His green robe fluttered even though there was no wind, but his eyes shone brighter and brighter, revealing the uncontrollable passion in his heart. Yu Qianqiu seemed to feel a raging fire suddenly igniting in his skinny chest, burning fiercely. He massacred the divine realm by himself. Even the 6 ancient gods were not his match. Amazing! Bai Changchun let out a long sigh. The green robe on his body slowly calmed down, just like his emotions. He raised his head and looked at the big moon in the sky. His eyes were shining brightly as he said, "It seems that I still have a long way to go. I hope to see the glory of the #1 expert in the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then will my life not be in vain." When these words fell into Yu Qianqiu's ears, he couldn't help but worry. If his master really did encounter that terrifying demon god one day, then he didn't dare to think about it any further in fear. "Master, the current emperor of the underworld should not be your match, right?" Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice. "Him? No wonder he is the emperor who controls the underworld." Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. He shook his head lightly and said, "When I fought with his underworld generals, I used them as a reference to estimate his strength. In the end, I underestimated the emperor of the underworld's strength. Once we fought, I realized that I was ridiculously wrong. When he attacked, I did not have the strength to resist at all. In just 3 moves he severely injured me. Especially the speed of his attack. It was simply terrifying. Just 1 move. I was hit by his 1,300 punches in an instant. I was severely injured on the spot. If I had not dispersed most of the power in time, I am afraid that I would have died without a complete corpse. You would not be able to see me standing here today. He is so powerful." Yu Qianqiu cried out involuntarily. He looked behind him and said, "Could it be that you are still not his match? I heard from Grandma Yin that Old Man Meng's cultivation has already reached the early stage of the minor god realm. Even he could not do anything to you. Could it be that the emperor of the underworld is more powerful than him? Previously, I thought that the emperor of the underworld's cultivation was the true late stage of the underworld emperor. But after hearing what you said, I understand that the emperor of the underworld's cultivation has probably long surpassed the late stage of the underworld emperor. According to my judgment, he should be slightly stronger than that Old Man Meng. But you don't have to worry." As he spoke, Bai Changchun suddenly looked at the all-heavens boundary and said, "The all-heavens boundary is a good place for cultivation. I have comprehended a set of magic arts to borrow strength from it. Even if I meet the emperor of the underworld again, although I may not be able to defeat him, it will be impossible for him to seriously injure me like last time. What's more, I feel that my cultivation has reached the critical point of breaking through again. It should not take more than a few days. After fighting a few rounds with Old Man Meng to clear up my doubts, I think it will be about time." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu slightly lowered his head with a somewhat gloomy expression. He had originally wanted to invite Bai Changchun to the immortal world to solve some problems. After all, who knew if the song he composed would be in line with Emperor Jin's wishes? If Emperor Jin or someone else wanted to deal with him afterwards, he could drag Bai Changchun out to suppress them. In that case, no one would dare to touch him in the future. But now it seemed that Emperor Jin's strength was not weaker than the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. He was not selfish enough to drag his master into danger. Bai Changchun glanced at him. In fact, from the moment he said that Empress Dowager Jin had issued a decree to force him to compose a song, and the date of the wedding was approaching, Bai Changchun already knew that this disciple was probably asking for his help. Now that this disciple heard that he was not a match for the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi, he did not mention anything about helping. It was obvious that this disciple was worried about the safety of his teacher. He could not help but nod slightly in his heart. He had not misjudged this disciple. However, how could he just stand by and watch as his disciple was in danger without doing anything? Bai Changchun clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the starry sky. There were some things that he would not tell Yu Qianqiu now. He was afraid that if he told him, this kid would become lazy and rely on him. This was the biggest taboo for a cultivator. This guy had already had enough adventures. It might not be a bad thing to train him more. A beam of light shot over from afar, and suddenly stopped not far away. Songyin Exine appeared and looked over in shock. Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu both turned to look. Bai Changchun was still looking at the starry sky with his hands behind his back, unmoved. Songyin Exine recognized the green-robed elder at first glance. It was the legendary person who challenged the Emperor of the Underworld. He looked closely and realized that the elder was only a mid-stage immortal emperor. He relaxed a little and flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. He cupped his hands at Bai Changchun and said, "You must be the expert who broke into the Underworld Royal Palace, fought the 4 generals of the Underworld, and challenged the Emperor of the Underworld? I am the great minister of the Heartless Palace, Songyin Exine. Greetings." Bai Changchun tilted his head and looked at him. Then he continued to look at the stars expressionlessly. Songyin Exine's expression was a little awkward. The other party did not seem to care about him at all. Although he was a little unhappy, a person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. The other party could fight the 4 generals of the Underworld alone, escape from the hands of the Emperor of the Underworld, and play around with the little god Old Man Meng. He admitted that he did not have the ability to do so, so he had to endure it. Yu Qianqiu, who was a little dispirited, immediately became energetic when he saw this. He rubbed his hands and smiled as he introduced Songyin Exine. "Old Song, to tell you the truth, this is my master. This is also the reason why I insisted on coming here." Chapter 1070. He's your master? Songyin Exine was shocked. He looked at the two of them in disbelief and said, "If he's from the human world, then wouldn't you?" Before Yu Qianqiu could say anything, Bai Changchun had already interrupted him with a cold snort. "What's the point of someone who's about to die knowing so much?" Songyin Exine's pupil suddenly shrank. His right hand was already on the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and said sternly, "Yu Qianqiu, what's the meaning of this?" "Hee, that." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun with an embarrassed smile. He did not know if Bai Changchun had the confidence to kill Songyin Exine. After all, he had personally witnessed Songyin Exine's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. It was simply too powerful. Bai Changchun slowly turned around and glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He said, "You killed his grandson. There's already a death grudge between you and him. Leaving him alive will be a disaster. Master will help you get rid of this disaster today." How embarrassing. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands together in embarrassment. He did not expect the old man's temper to be so straightforward. He had not even asked for help, and the old man was already going to make a move. Songyin Exine immediately felt a great sense of danger. In a situation where he had no confidence in defeating his opponent, he knew that he could not stay here for long. Just as he was about to quickly escape, he suddenly felt a huge pressure pressing down on him from all directions. His expression immediately changed. "Hi." Songyin Exine exhaled. His steps were as heavy as a mountain. Each step left a deep footprint on the ground. Dong dong dong. The ground shook as he retreated with great difficulty. The closer he got to the other party, the more dangerous it felt. He had thought that it would not be easy for the other party to suppress him. However, when he saw the other party standing with his hands behind his back, he immediately panicked. The other party really did have the strength to kill him easily. He immediately spat angrily. Bai Changchun, I have no grievances with you. Don't go too far. Let me see your 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on his hands that were about to pull out the sword, and he gave an irrelevant answer. Don't think about luck. If you don't pull out your sword now, you won't have another chance. Pull out your sword. At this point Yu Qianqiu, who was behind Bai Changchun, dodged to the side of the cliff with Xinyu. He was prepared to leave if anything went wrong. Songyan Xian knew that there was no turning back now, so he shouted in shock and anger, sword drawing style. With a wave of his hand, a dazzling bright light instantly shot out from his sleeve. The light instantly illuminated the world, and the startling light effortlessly broke through the huge pressure around him. Like a delicate heavenly dragon, the incomparably domineering light swept out with a whistling sound, as if it wanted to break the world apart. Almost at the same time, the green robe that was about to be engulfed by the shocking light seemed to be blown by a breeze. As it swayed, the brilliance of the stars and the moon in the night sky seemed to freeze, like a huge disk blocking in front of the skinny body. Xinyu, who was about to flash into the boundary barrier, and Yu Qianqiu, who was about to flash into utopia, were stunned at the same time. This was because they had both seen the domineering power of Songyan Xian's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. It was a powerful force that felt unstoppable. However, at this moment, the dazzling light was blocked by the huge void disk that was like a tall mountain. The surrounding air seemed to have been sucked out by the huge disk in an instant. The 2 of them even felt that the breath in their lungs was forcefully sucked out by the disk, making them almost suffocate. The void disk stood between heaven and earth. It was abnormally grand and huge, and it rippled with a mysterious luster. It blocked the shocking light that seemed to be able to split the world apart. The 2 of them originally thought that there would be an earth-shattering sound when they collided, but the combination of hardness and softness resulted in silence. Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, raised one hand and stroked his beard. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and his hand slid out from under his beard. He stretched out his hand toward the huge disk in front of him. The indomitable disk was immediately pushed forward by 3 feet, and began to rotate slowly. It seemed to be rotating with great difficulty, under the immense pressure. Oomph! Bai Changchun suddenly let out a cold snort that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. He raised his hand in a very natural manner, and drew 2 fingers towards the sky towards the huge disk that was rotating with difficulty. A ray of light zigzagged across the huge disk, as if it was going to split the huge disk into 2 from the center. Immediately, light and shadow intertwined on the huge disk. In the blink of an eye, half of it turned white, and the other half black, turning into 2 yin and yang fish chasing each other head to tail. The entire disk immediately rotated faster, stirring up the shocking light that was pressing against the huge disk. Although this exchange of blows seemed slow, it was actually completed in the time of a single breath. Tai Chi. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He stared at the yin and yang fish that were chasing each other. The huge disk was exactly the same as the Tai Chi diagram he saw in his previous life, and it was displaying the mysterious power of the Tai Chi diagram. Xinyu's mouth formed a circle, and his eyes widened. He never dreamed that Grey Cloud Xian's 3-in-1 sword drawing style would be blocked so silently. That was the 3-in-1 sword drawing style of the Heartless Palace that instantly destroyed half of Twilight City. However, what surprised him even more was yet to come. Return. Bai Changchun let out a sonorous chant. As his green robe fluttered, he pressed one of his palms towards the huge disk. The indomitable Tai Chi disk shrank rapidly, and the fierce light that followed it seemed to become a part of the Tai Chi disk, shrinking rapidly as well. In the blink of an eye, the shrunken Tai Chi disk merged with the shocking light, and became the size of a washbasin. It absorbed and rotated in Bai Changchun's outstretched palm. Although the originally dazzling light had shrunk, it had become gentle. It was like a lantern covered with gauze, illuminating Bai Changchun's green robe particularly clearly. However, Everyone could sense that the condensed ball of light in his palm was filled with a terrifying power that made one's heart palpitate. Is this the famous 3-in-1 sword-drawing style of the Heartless Palace? As his green robe fluttered slightly, Bai Changchun clenched one hand behind his back and used the other to absorb the light ball. He said coldly, "That's all there is to it." How? How is this possible? Grey Cloud Xian's expression changed drastically in shock. He thought that the other party would use his powerful cultivation or treasures to forcefully break his sword-drawing style. But he never expected that someone would be able to silently and gently absorb the power of his sword-drawing style with just a wave of his hand. How could the great power that had already been released be absorbed by someone else again? It was so easily caught in his hand. He could actually catch the energy released by someone else with his bare hands. This was a great amount of released energy. It wasn't a physical object, so how was this possible? Grey Cloud Xian's face instantly turned pale. Only then did he know that the other party's strength far surpassed his. And he was no match for him at all. Fortunately, the great pressure that restricted his movements had already been broken by his sword-drawing style. Any thoughts of resistance that Grey Cloud Xian had instantly vanished. Go. The faster the better, the further the better. Grey Cloud Xian fled in a flash. However, before he could move, Bai Changchun seemed to have already predicted what he would do. He said calmly, "I said that you're someone who's about to die. Do you still want to run?" The ball of light in his palm suddenly stopped spinning. With this stop, the ball of light immediately showed signs of expanding and exploding. Bai Changchun's palm pierced through the expanding ball of light at an extremely fast speed. As it moved in and out, his 5 fingers drew dreamy trajectories. Almost instantly, countless dazzling light beams shot out from the ball of light like a violent storm. They shot out densely like a net, and the sharp sound of them tearing through the air rang out incessantly. Lost immortal finger. Yu Qianqiu mumbled with his mouth agape. This was the 3rd time he had seen his master use the lost immortal finger. He had never seen anyone survive this move. In reality, Grey Cloud Xian had already teleported and disappeared from where he was. However, his miserable cries could be heard from the void where the countless dazzling light beams shot out. The moment he appeared in the air, he was already riddled with holes by the countless dazzling light beams, and he was devoured in the blink of an eye. Following his miserable cries, his figure could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a dense meteor shower shooting into the starry night sky. After the energy of the expanding ball of light was vented, Bai Changchun pulled out his palm and pressed down on it. The ball of light was sucked back into his palm and started spinning again. However, its size had shrunk by half. Shen Yu and Yu Qianqiu, who were still standing dumbfounded at the edge of the cliff, suddenly saw Bai Changchun flick his sleeve. The ball of light flew over their heads with a whoosh and entered the barrier of heavens behind them. The 2 silly birds turned around dumbfoundedly with their mouths wide open. They saw the ball of light distort the moment it entered the barrier of heavens. It was quickly torn apart by an invisible energy and silently disappeared without a trace. Such a powerful energy disappeared just like that. The 2 of them slowly turned around at the same time and looked at each other. They felt their throats go dry, and they didn't know what to say. Finally, they looked in the direction that Grey Cloud Xian had escaped in. The scene of him being riddled with holes still appeared in their minds. Grey Cloud Xian's miserable cries seemed to still echo in their ears. Grey Cloud Xian, who was a middle-stage immortal emperor, was killed just like that? The 2 of them stole another glance at each other, as if they couldn't accept this reality. Shen Yu's expression was a little ugly. He didn't dare to look straight at Bai Changchun. Worry and hesitation appeared in his eyes. He didn't know if it would be his turn next. Even Grey Cloud Xian was killed so easily. He didn't think he had any chance of escaping. Old song. I'm sorry, I didn't expect him to make a move so quickly. I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye to you. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze from the sky and thought of the huge Tai Chi diagram from before. He flashed to Bai Changchun's side and asked with an embarrassed smile, "You really broadened my horizons just now. May I know the name of Master's move?" "I don't know. It doesn't have a name yet." The skinny figure shrouded in the green robe turned around. Bai Changchun put his hands behind his back again, as if nothing had happened. He looked up at the darkness on the other side of the cliff and said, "This is a new power manipulation method that I comprehended in the barrier of heavens. One movement is divided into yin and yang. It's mysterious and profound. I still need to continue to comprehend and perfect it." Chapter 1071. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. He felt that this old man was indeed too abnormal. He could easily comprehend some kind of cultivation method. How could others who cultivated the same way as him endure it, especially him, his disciple? The theory of Tai Chi Yin and Yang seemed to have a complete system to follow in his previous life. Unfortunately, he was not an all-rounder who knew everything about astronomy and geography. He did not know much about this mysterious thing. Otherwise, he could really make up a few things to make the old man look at him differently. "Is there anything else?" Bai Changchun suddenly looked at him and asked lightly. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He heard a hint of, "Don't disturb me if there's nothing else," from his master's words. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he still bowed and said, "Seeing that master is fine, disciple is relieved. Disciple still has some things to deal with, so I won't disturb master." Bai Changchun nodded expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu bowed again and left. Then, he slowly took a few steps back and flashed to Xin Yu's side. He tilted his head and stole a glance at his master. He saw that Bai Changchun was still standing with his hands behind his back, looking up at the starry sky. His green robe fluttered in the night wind. Xin Yu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a panicked expression. He did not know what he wanted to do. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a smile and said, "Don't be nervous. I always keep my word. I promised to help you remove the restriction in your body, so naturally, I will do it. Relax your body." Xin Yu was surprised and happy when he heard this. He looked at him in disbelief. He did not know if what he said was true or not. After all, he had not sent him out as promised. However, it was not up to him whether he believed it or not. He could only do as he was told and relax his body nervously. "Open your mouth." Yu Qianqiu let out a low growl, his 5 fingers grabbing towards Xin Yu's mouth. Xin Yu immediately felt the bead in his body rushing towards his throat. He quickly opened his mouth, and a green light shot out. Yu Qianqiu's hand grabbed, and his fist was hidden in his sleeve. Xin Yu was overjoyed. He touched his chest and confirmed that the thing in his body had been removed. The stone in his heart immediately fell to the ground. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and didn't know what to say. After a while he said incoherently, "I will definitely keep my promise and send you out. No need. I have my own way to leave, but I want you to promise me something else." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the all-heavens boundary outside the cliff. "Every year on this day, you have to wait for me at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day. If I still don't come after a day, you have to come back. How about that?" Then he looked at Bai Changchun. Xin Yu also peeked at Bai Changchun. Although the restriction in his body had been removed, he had no choice but to agree. His master could enter and exit the all-heavens boundary at will. He had completely lost his defensive advantage. The consequences of not agreeing could be imagined. He nodded awkwardly. "I understand. Every year on this day, I will wait for you at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day." A smile bloomed on Yu Qianqiu's face. "Xin Yu, don't blame me for using you. You have to know that you provoked me first. Furthermore, if it wasn't for my help, who knows when you would be able to return here. So we are even now. You can go. Go back to the home you have been away from for 150,000 years. I'm glad to have met you in the netherworld this time. We will meet again if fate allows. I should go back now. Goodbye." Then he smiled and cupped his fists at Xin Yu. Then, he turned around and bowed to Bai Changchun, who was standing under the moonlight with his hands behind his back. Just as Xin Yu cupped his fists to return the greeting, he realized that Yu Qianqiu had disappeared without a trace. There was no fluctuation in the air around him. He had no idea where Yu Qianqiu had gone. Did he really leave? Xin Yu was stunned. Then he became a little excited. With Yu Qianqiu's departure, and the words he said before he left, the resentment that had accumulated in his heart disappeared instantly. Thinking about it carefully, Yu Qianqiu did not owe him anything. He even brought him back to the home that he had been away from for 150,000 years. Seriously speaking, he should be thanking him. Shen Yu took a deep breath. The shackles that had been on him all these years had finally been removed. He could be free again. His gaze fell on the skinny old man in a green robe. He bowed respectfully to Yao Yao in silence. Then, he turned into a stream of light and flew away without any worries or fear. After he disappeared into the distance, Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back and looking at the stars, suddenly looked outside the celestial boundary. His eyes flickered and he snorted coldly. "How dare you treat my disciple as a performer and sing for you? How majestic of an emperor! Just change the wedding ceremony to a funeral ceremony." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and turned into a stream of light that flew away quickly. He was heading in the direction of Old Meng. The sun was shining brightly in Utopia. Weeds and wildflowers clustered beside the gurgling stream. On a small mountain surrounded by the stream, Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to block the glaring sunlight. After staying in the dark netherworld for a long time, he really could not adapt to the sunlight. After a while, he put down his hand and looked around at the lush greenery at the foot of the mountain. It was so good to take a breath of fresh air. He could not help but sigh. Humans and ghosts are indeed different. People should stay where they are. After saying that, he closed his eyes again. After a moment of silence, he slowly shook his head and opened his eyes. He found that he had indeed completely lost contact with the tomb of the god of sin. Not only could he not find Bai Changchun, but the silver ball that he had thrown inside did not respond at all. He did not know what trick there was in the tomb of the god of sin to be able to isolate the outside world. It was impossible to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin at any time. Fortunately, he had made preparations in advance. He made an agreement with Shen Yu once a year, so he had the opportunity to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin. It was unknown what he thought of, but after shaking his head, he disappeared again. The sky was high and the sky was wide. At the peak of the love mound that suddenly emerged from the sea of clouds, Mei He, whose clothes were fluttering in the wind, held both of his hands with a gloomy expression. There was a broken nameplate in his hands. The owner of this nameplate was Grey Cloud Xian. The breaking of the nameplate meant that the owner had died. Opposite him was the tall and thin Wang Qing. His wide blue robe was fluttering in the wind, and his long hair, which was not tied up, fluttered behind him. The eyes in the two holes of the silver mask were cold. He stared motionlessly at the nameplate in Mei He's hands. No one could see what expression he had on his face. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound not far away. Mei He felt that the wind that swept back and forth on the mountain peak had solidified. He turned his head and saw that the six-dragon snow blue, which was originally restrained, was now overflowing with light. The huge sword that was half inserted into the mountain peak was slowly being pulled out by itself. Mei He could feel the anger of his honored master. Thinking about it, the only one in the Heartless Palace who could use the 3-in-1 sword drawing style was the High Priest. The death of the High Priest was indeed a huge loss to the Heartless Palace. With a clang sound, the six-dragon snow blue returned to its original position. The flowing light was restrained again, and the wind swept back and forth on the mountain peak again. Mei He raised his head slightly to look at his honored master, but he saw that his honored master had already turned around. He could only see his honored master's back. He said in an indifferent voice, "I will go down the mountain to attend Jintai's wedding ceremony in a few days. Before that, I don't want to be distracted. Release the news that your eldest senior brother has died. Take the opportunity to find out the cause of his death to deceive others. You will personally lead people to the netherworld and take the core forces of the Heartless Palace away in batches. When you reach the netherworld, there will naturally be people who will receive you." Mei He's waist straightened. He immediately felt that something was wrong. How was this investigating the cause of eldest senior brother's death? It was obviously secretly transferring the forces of the Heartless Palace to the Netherworld. Could it be? Just as he was about to ask the reason, he saw Wang Qing raise his right hand slightly and stop him from asking any more questions. His indifferent voice continued to be ethereal. If I am defeated by Jin Tai and can still survive, I will immediately go to the Netherworld to meet you. If I am lucky enough to win against Jin Tai, I will naturally call you back to regroup. If I die, the disciples of the Heartless Palace will be under your command. If you have the chance to take revenge for me in the future, then do it. If not, then forget it. Don't ask any more questions. There are some things that you will naturally know when the time comes. Go do what you have to do. Meihi's expression changed unpredictably. He paused for a moment before bowing and accepting the order. Yes. Then, he turned into a stream of light and entered the undulating sea of clouds on the mountainside. In a hidden valley outside the hallucinatory immortal city, Yu Qianqiu's head suddenly popped out from a corner of the mountain wall. He looked left and right to make sure there was no one around before popping out. He originally wanted to teleport back to the World Chamber of Commerce, but he thought that he had stayed in the Netherworld for such a long time. If no one saw him return, it would raise suspicions. Some things had to be explained, such as Zhang Yunxin's death. Unexpectedly, just as he popped out of the mountain wall and tidied up his clothes, he suddenly smelled a special fragrance. It was a familiar feeling. He then wrinkled his nose and fanned his nostrils, sniffing around with a puzzled expression. Just as he walked out of the crevice in the mountain, he suddenly heard someone shouting in the air. Over there! Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw 3 streams of light had already landed on the other side of the mountain slope. Although he couldn't see clearly what was happening over there, he heard a clear and melodious voice of a woman saying in a panic, "What are you trying to do?" Then, he heard a lewd laughter and an unusually familiar dialogue. "Little girl, I don't think you're a disciple of any famous sect based on your clothes. You're sneakily hiding here and there by yourself. Did you do something shameful?" Someone immediately answered with a lewd laugh. "That's right. Stop obediently, and let us examine you properly." "I didn't. It was you who chased me. That's why I was hiding." The woman who spoke suddenly screamed, "Don't come over. Otherwise, my grandfather won't let you off." That you're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.